All right, this is the November 16th, 2022 regular monthly meeting of the Darien Parks and Recreation Commission. Calling the meeting to order. And the first order of business is approval of the minutes of our October 19th meeting. Does anybody have any
comments? I have a couple of comments, and I'll try to make them brief. On page 5, on the 4th paragraph that begins with next, the second sentence says, according to the survey. I think what it should say is, according to the survey, items identified as most important to a majority of residents include blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
And then in the next sentence, it should say, Ms. Bonsack highlighted the items that are important to a small minority of residents, and then a colon.
Can you do that again for me, Cara? So
Sorry.
highlighted that the
Items that are important to a small minority of residents include colon, and then it can say concession, community room, indoor showers, blah, blah, blah.
To a
Small minority of residents.
Okay, got it.
And then on that last paragraph on page 5, the third line down, it says the remaining 30% would be likely comfortable with vending machines, and it should read and/or food trucks. Would be comfortable, would be likely comfortable with vending machines if vending machines and/or food trucks were made available.
Okay, got it.
And then page 6, first paragraph, last line, it says outdoor shows, it should say showers.
Yeah, I had that.
Yeah, okay, fine. And then in the sentence after the bullet points, I think what it should say is, Ms. Bonsack conveyed on behalf of the group that based on resident feedback, the recommended strategy is to renovate the existing facility. I'm not quite sure what the most cost and time efficient was.
That the recommended strategy based on the survey results
is to renovate the existing facility. And then you can just scratch all the other stuff.
Okay.
And then the only other thing I wanted to note was on page 7, where it said Ms. Bonsack agreed to obtain more information. I think you and I discussed and agreed that wasn't the appropriate role for me, so I don't know if you want that in the minutes or not, which is on page 7.
Yeah, because it's going to be hard for Cara to come up with costs.
Okay.
So I would just,
That was my
Take it
question.
out.
If it was incorrect, that was just really a question.
But it was said during the meeting, so it's not that she's going to do it. It's just saying that that's what we talked about. It's
Yeah.
not saying she has to do it. You know, we talked about it, and that was what happened at the meeting, and that's what we're trying to convey.
Okay.
And then, you know, if you wanted to talk about it during the other piece and say, hey, we talked about it, you know, and we agreed, we don't need, she can't do it, or she's not, you know, that's
She's
not her
not the
role.
right, that's not
She's
her
not her
role.
role.
Yeah.
That's all you have to
Yeah.
say. But I
Yes.
feel like for the minutes, this was what was actually.
so I think
recorded.
your suggestion is fine, but I think in the sentence where it says I agreed to do it, as long as everybody understands.
That you're not doing it, that we're not holding you to it. You're going to fire on it.
I don't care what's in the minutes.
No, I get it. No, that's true, but I'm saying this was an accurate representation of what was transpired at the meeting.
Page,
That's different.
Lori, I was looking at page 7, the
Yeah.
second to last paragraph, but I think as long as we're all square, I'm fine with the minutes.
Well, I have the second to last is to take a formal vote and then move forward with conversation. Mr. also asked if Ms.
Oh, shoot,
One
we have
second.
different pagination. Mine's under capital improvement projects.
Oh,
page
okay,
7.
okay.
The second to last paragraph. Sorry, under capital improvement projects, the third paragraph down
Okay,
from
got
that, on my page 7, the last line says, I agree to obtain more information.
Got it.
And I would just take
Scratch
that out.
that, got it, okay. Up above there, back in the previous section,
It says
There's
Susan
just-
S. Or no?
Well, it says, this Daily Echo, Ms. Bora, blah, blah, blah. It says where they are already under the commission's charge, comma, and then it just says Pear Tree Point Beach. That's just sort of loitering there, and I wasn't sure why. It's just a funny sentence.
Maybe just end it on,
Yeah.
needs to focus on renovating and maintaining and enhancing the services.
Period,
Or I would say, well, I do want to say that where they are already under the commission's charge.
period.
Yeah, period. Just say period, no.
Yeah, I don't know why that Pear Tree, it was just sort of
Guess we're talking
Good
about
point.
loitering there, not
hanging,
doing anything.
the hanger.
There's a hanger. I had a page, what's with my page 9, which is the discussion on invasives, B.
Yeah.
Towards the end it says, Ms. Geary clarified that before the trees of heaven are removed, I think we should specify the trees of heaven at Pear Tree Point.
Yep.
Because that was specific to that property. And what's page 11? I'll just give this to you, Pam.
Thank you.
But page 11, I just think where it says town council, I think it's spelled incorrectly. I think it's C-O-N-C-O-U-N-S-E-L. That is all I
Yes, I was a
had.
little distracted, so.
Yeah.
That's all I had.
I had
Anything?
similar changes, but I left mine at home, so those were the same as what I had.
Okay. So is everybody comfortable with the minutes as corrected?
Yes.
Okay, can I have a motion? Of the Susan, and then Kathy second. All in favor? Amy? Amy?
Mike is off.
Okay. No, the mic was off, I guess we can't count, so.
There's 5 of us anyway.
But there's 5 of us, okay. All right, we'll consider that.
Yes,
We are waiting for you to approve the minutes as changed?
yeah, no, that's what I'm saying, yes.
Yes, thank you. Okey dokey. Okay, do we have any public comment?
Nothing was emailed to me,
Okay, good. Moving right along. All right, next we're going to go on the presentation of Dan Biggs. Now, just to lay the groundwork for this evening's agenda, which is long, Pam and I tried to work this so that we're talking about the key projects, getting the update on Pear Tree, review the results of the standard of care, etc. Cara made the presentation last month about the Pear Tree survey results. So having all those pieces of information then should inform our discussion as we go into discussing and prioritizing the capital improvement project. So that was sort of really the focus of laying these things out.
Excuse me, Lori, we're having a very difficult time hearing. Is the mic near you, or could you put it around the table better so
Well,
we can all
Jim
hear?
Coughlin just said loud and clear he can hear us.
What?
Jim Coughlin, who's on virtually as well, said he could hear us loud and clear.
Mike, can you hear us?
Yeah, Cheryl, I think what I had to do was turn up the volume on my computer to hear better. So maybe like on your keyboard, there's a little volume control there. I don't know, you probably have a different keyboard than I have, but there's something that looks like a microphone or something, speaker.
All the way to the
Yeah,
top.
this is Amy, I'm actually with Cheryl, I've got mine all the way up and it's hard to hear.
I don't know where the mic is.
Yeah, I'm
so-
hearing pretty well actually, but
And
I
I'm
don't have a
thinking
computer
of just
that-
dialing in on a number as well.
We turned it up though.
We did, yeah.
Mike might be in the camera.
I think the mics are in this.
Cheryl, maybe you can also put your sound on off and just dial in.
Okay, thank you, Amy.
I mean, I'm just gonna try it.
That's them, that's not us.
How's that?
Display audio, yeah. And Mike, typically in the camera.
Okay, well, we've got to keep moving. So we will all speak as loudly as we can, at the risk of shouting. Okay, so as I was saying, the presentation by Dan on the update on the COP approval for Pear Tree Point and Cara's presentation on the results of the standards of care should inform our discussion on prioritizing and gaining consensus on the proposed operating and capital budgets. Okay, so that would be the focus of this evening, and then we do have a few other bits of business that we have to cover off as well that are somewhat time sensitive. So I am going to turn it over to Dan Biggs. Dan, are you in there?
Yep.
Where'd he go?
It's the third block over.
Okay.
He just doesn't have his camera on.
Okay.
Hi. Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Dan, thank you for
So,
joining
I'm,
us.
I'm assembling a slide deck that I'm going to send to Pam in 2 seconds so she can send around. That's from me, Mike, and Craig, all of our slides in one spot. So, but I'll let Mike, if you want to start.
Yeah, maybe I'll just kick things off then. So, well, Dan, you're doing that. So thanks, Lori. Thank you to the commission for having us. So, we're here this evening, as you said, to kind of just update the commission on what is an important milestone in the work that the Pear Tree Beach Building Committee has been up to over the last 4 years. So, I thought just for the record, because there may be some who are kind of either listening now or will be listening to this who don't really understand kind of visibility into the background of what we're talking about here. I thought I'd spend just 2 minutes and kind of set some context. So, the Pear Tree Beach Building Committee was formed back in October 2018 by the Board of Selectmen, by Jamie Stevenson, at that point, our first selectman. And the charge of the building committee was to proceed with a set of recommendations that had come out of the Parks and Rec's master plan. That master plan was published in January of 2018, and it was the product of work that was done for, some number of months, in advance of that. And, that master plan contemplated improvements for, essentially all the parks throughout the town. Our focus in the building committee was on Pear Tree Beach. And essentially, there were, that set of recommendations called out improvements really kind of across 2 dimensions. One was the building, took a look at that building and determined what to do with it, either improve it or replace it. And the other set of recommendations centered on what I'm calling site infrastructure. And the site infrastructure really was defined as, or is defined in the way that I'm using that term, and Dan will kind of refer, Craig will refer to it. And by the way, apologies. In addition to Dan and I've invited Craig Flaherty of Redness and Mead to join us. Many of you know Craig. Craig's done a tremendous amount of work in many capacities throughout the town, and he worked along with us in his capacity at Redness and Mead to perform engineering analysis for us throughout the project. So back to the definitions here. So site infrastructure elements that I'm referring to really refer to. And once again, some of the terminology actually comes out of not so much the charge, but the RFP that was produced as a follow-up to the charge when we went out to engage support for the project. So really the first element, and maybe the key element here, was to do some work on the parking lot, essentially raise or re-engineer the parking lot to minimize flooding and beach erosion. Another key element was repair the boat ramp. We're all aware of issues that we've had with the kind of the existing design of the boat ramp. And there's some associated dredging that got inserted around that as well. Doing some work to restore the shoreline throughout the area around the park, to the extent that would be achievable. Enhance ADA accessibility. There's some landscaping that was called out as well, and some other site elements. But those are what we'll refer to, or I'm referring to, as the site infrastructure elements. And that's essentially what the COP that was granted by Connecticut Deep is calling out as well. Some further background, in addition to the building committee that was made up of 7 members, and my co-chair, Randy Tankus, is not with us here this evening, but the building committee throughout has been co-chaired by Randy Tankus and myself, with Tom Bell as secretary. So in addition to the members of the building committee, and also that building committee was comprised of representatives from both the Board of Selectmen as well as Board of Finance. I'll call it the kind of extended working team was also made up of the architecture group of Neil Houck Architects, Weston Sampson, and kind of engineering, site engineer team. Redness and Mead, bringing on engineering expertise. And we also engaged the services of a group called RACE, Coastal Engineering. Some of you may know RACE through the work that they did at the Norotan Yacht Club. They were instrumental in the kind of the rebuild of the Norotan Yacht Club after Sandy. So it was very important to us to really essentially surround ourselves with, I guess the deepest expertise that was available to us to solve a number of the problems that we were trying to work through. And additionally, throughout the entire exercise, essentially over the 4 years that we've been at it, there was a great deal of consultation and coordination with various agencies, including Connecticut Deep, kind of central to our mission here, FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Environmental Protection Administration in DC. You know, more local, closer to home, we were working very closely, of course, in coordinating with Parks and Recs, Planning and Zoning, the Assessor's Office, the Building Department, Public Works, Advisory Commission on Coastal Waters, and of course, very importantly, the Darien Boat Club, our neighbor at the site. You know, for what we're discussing here, you know, I would say, you know, roughly 18 months from inception, you know, the work that we'll now get into here culminated with the building committee voting to authorize Weston and Sampson to proceed to Connecticut Deep for the application of what's called a certificate of permission to enable us to proceed with, once again, what Dan will be describing here as the site improvement plan. That was once again done in March of 2020. You may also be aware that the building committee essentially went into a bit of a hiatus. This was really at the height of COVID, and at the first selectman's request, Jamie Stevenson's request, you know, essentially the in-person activities or the kind of more active work of the building committee was put on hold, with the exception of this one track. This one track being once again the activity through, you know, working through the application with Connecticut Deep and all of the associated entities that we had to work through, and that was led by Weston and Sampson. And I guess the important point to make here this evening now, and we'll get into it, is we achieved a very, very important milestone, what I consider to be really a precedent-setting. It's an important recognition for the town, and that is that Connecticut Deep came back to us and granted us the certificate of permission to proceed with essentially all of what we defined within the site improvement plan for Pantry Point Beach. It's precedent-setting to the extent that no other municipality is along the coastal, throughout Connecticut is requested it from what we understand, and certainly, of course, because of that, no other municipality has been granted it, but it's my sense that we may have kind of laid the groundwork for other municipalities like us with, you know, key elements along the coastal areas to go back to Connecticut Deep now and make similar requests once they understand what we've been granted here. So, and you can see here, and maybe the only important thing to point out here, interestingly, is we just passed our 4-year anniversary for the building committee. It's I think it's been in operation a little longer than any of us anticipated. Things sometimes take a while, and I guess COVID didn't really help. But the building committee, I think, was formed in October 24th, I think, of 2018. And you can see that last note there. So essentially 4 years, by and large 4 years after the formation of the building committee, just coincidentally, we were granted the COP by Connecticut Deep. I'll turn it,
Oh dear.
Just have to log back in.
Is there a time limit?
No, it's just because it was showing that technical
But
difficulties.
why was it doing that?
I don't know. It's been doing it since today, like right before this meeting, and it kept showing that.
Is it gonna keep doing that?
I don't know.
I think the Wi-Fi signal is weak. Like mine's been, because of the wind, usually, the Wi-Fi goes in and out all day. I gave up because I couldn't get on.
Did you get Dan the whole tape?
I never tried yet. I should try right now.
No.
I have Wi-Fi. I'm sharing it with you.
Thanks, buddy.
So why is it? So you're doing join this meeting, aren't you? Aren't you the organizer?
We had to leave it. It dropped.
No, and that's not what I'm asking.
You know. Well,
Should you be starting the meeting as opposed to joining it?
Because the
Well,
message.
I did pass it off to Dan when we were all trying to
Yeah.
share screens.
Yeah, it's that, he's the
But
presenter.
he's the organizer?
I passed it over to him because we were trying to figure out how to share
Do that
screens.
though?
She shared with me with my mom.
See, I think it's,
You're not in my contacts, I don't know.
I think it's because it's not picking you up as the organizer.
After the network security,
I am the organizer.
Okay.
So I was almost thinking switching it so that it wouldn't drop us, but I don't know. You know what I mean? Staying organizers.
Did you just open the meeting or did you just join the meeting?
That's what I was asking, whether
If
she
you just joined, it's not open.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Just
concerned
sitting there
about, is that
waiting.
when you went back in, you didn't, isn't there a password you have to put in to open the meeting? No? As the organizer?
Mike, can you hear us?
I can, yeah.
We're all set. So
All right, Danny, you there?
hurry up.
I can't turn my
Here.
I can't turn my camera on for some reason. I don't know if anybody else. I don't see anybody else either.
Maybe it's best to keep it off. To say
Yeah,
the
that's-
truth.
Yeah.
And I can't share my screen.
Yeah.
Well, sharing the screen, that was a miracle anyway.
Okay.
This is very.
Yeah, I was impressed.
It's really.
And see, it's doing it again.
It's doing it again.
But it was going on and off. See, it went away now. So we're obviously having,
I don't know if it's any help, but I could certainly send out a Zoom link. Yeah,
No,
if
we
that's of
can't,
any
we
help.
can't do that because it's an official meeting.
Yeah, I know. I
can't
realize
change
that.
it.
All right, so Danny,
Do you
there?
want to try?
Pam, it's Amy, can you just forward us the presentation?
Right, that's what I was thinking. Michael, if you can forward on the presentation,
Yeah.
so we can project it here and try to follow along. Oh, we see you now.
No, we need Dan.
Yeah, Dan has that, and I don't know if Dan's able to.
There's Dan.
Well, Dan can forward it to me, but the thing is, I then have to minimize this. We wouldn't see
No,
anybody.
we're saying a lot of us have machines,
Oh,
so we can at
right.
least look at it.
No, you didn't send it along to folks.
Roy, what's the network here?
I don't know, ask me.
Want me to send Jim too?
That's the network and password. Wi-Fi.
Yes, please.
It's the password's Darien Town Hall.
And it's Town of
All
Darien
lowercase?
is the network.
Yes.
All lowercase.
Yes.
Not Town of Darien.
Town of Darien.
If anyone's online and wants to put their email in the chat, I can probably just forward along that way too.
This is really disappointing. This is-
Someone needs to put their computer on mute.
I should be able to do that.
You have to mute.
Yeah, it's the callers, Amy.
You can't mute them.
Them.
The network is Town of Darien Public, not Town.
That did it.
Town of Darien.
Yeah.
Not Town of Darien. It's
So
the
now just unmute Dan.
Yeah,
So town public?
Town Public, yeah. And then Darien Town Hall, all lowercase. one word.
He's muted himself.
Yeah. Dan, you can unmute.
Got it. Okay.
All right, Dan, let's let it.
Darien Town Hall.
Let's go for it.
Go.
Try it again.
No. Okay. Let's see. Where were we? So after Mike's intro, he mentioned a lot about the COP and what that timeline was, and that thing called COVID kind of came up right in the middle of it. So access to state staff was extremely difficult, but a couple years later, we're here now. So the certificate of permission is basically the permit by the Connecticut Department of Environmental and Energy, DEEP as it's known. That permit basically allows you to do a couple things that were included in this document. The first was, which is a formality from a paper push standpoint, was to allow the Darien Boat Club to be permitted in the current location. It previously did not have an active permit allowing the building structure to be there, so that's just a formality that was covered. The second is reconstruction and modification of the existing parking lot, which include removing certain number of stalls, and then regrading and resurfacing the parking lot to reduce localized flooding within the parking area. So by reducing that parking, the asphalt area, we then are giving that space back to the beach and to the landscape side of the beach access. So regrading, new stormwater system for drainage, raising portions of the parking lot. Many may think that the parking lot is completely flat, but actually has a slope to it that go towards the drain as you drive in. The drain that's straight ahead is one of the lower spots that allows a backwater flooding to occur during high water events. So that area is very low, and this allows us to raise that top of the drain grate up to a higher elevation. So during high tide events, that the backwater will not come back up into and flood the parking lot from that side. Now, there is flooding on the parking lot coming over the beach side, over into the parking lot as well. This would prevent some of that just by increasing that distance of the beach width, giving more separation from the current edge of water to edge of parking lot. That would inherently help the flow of water during high storm events or king tide events that occur on occasion. So reducing the parking lot area, as well as reconstructing the boat ramp. As many are aware, the boat ramp slope, the pitch of it, for either launching your boat or taking a boat out is challenging and difficult, particularly during low tide periods when the water is very low. The ramp, you actually have to get your back tires almost all the way into the water in order to launch your boat. So reconstructing that ramp at the proper pitch is included within the COP. And likewise, at the bottom of that boat ramp, many may know that there's sedimentation that has inherently built up over time. So this permit allows localized dredging at the bottom of the boat ramp and out through into portions of the channel, basically around the boat club's slip areas. So that's included in the permission as well. And then finally, the fifth piece is there's a wetland that's just to the west of the existing bathroom facility. So it's restoring a portion of that wetland to make it more ecologically sound and sustainable for future years. So those are the 5 major components. As Mike mentioned, the building aspects were not included in this permission. They were never really brought into light. This is more of a site standpoint, site improvements that we're working on, and that has been permitted by the state. The COP is valid for a 5-year period, and if construction were not to begin within that 5 period, an extension can be applied for prior to the expiration of that permit. Basically a formality with the state, but they will allow it for another period of time. But it's highly suggested that construction improvements, some improvements were to start within this period. I think Craig was going to cover some of the kind of technical components that we're talking about. It's easier to show some of these on the graphics that I don't think you all can see, but we're hopefully sending around.
Dan, are you able to try again to share your screen, or?
I can try. Let me try.
You have Craig's slides?
I have everybody's slides.
Yeah, well, okay.
Yep. Oh, okay. Here we are.
Wonderful.
Well, for now, you can park on page 8 of the deck, or even there, either one, 7 or 8. So, we did this because we thought it would be easier to share the graphics, just sitting around the room trying to explain. So hopefully this will last for a bit. I guess I'm here to kind of talk about the why we thought it was a good idea to recommend elevating the parking lot and the drainage inlets, and why the DEP and Army Corps actually approved it and allowed it when it generally runs in contrast to their policies up to this point. And I can do that in 2 words, and then I'll do it in 1,000 words. But the 2 words are coastal resiliency. Pear Tree Beach, the whole property, the whole park, is very low lying, and I'll provide some comparisons. And by that fact, is very vulnerable to the effects of sea level rise, to the increasing intensity of coastal events, and even we've seen in Ida the increasing intensity of rain events. So for comparison, Weed Beach, when you're driving around the parking lots at Weed Beach, you're around elevation 8, plus or minus 12 inches. Here at Weed Beach, the parking lot at its low point is at about elevation 4 feet, sloping up towards the front beach, with the view out to Long Island Sound at about elevation 7, 7.5. So the entire parking lot is lower in elevation than the parking lot at Weed Beach, but it's also materially lower as it slopes down to that one catch basin you see in this graphic. It says catch basin rim equals 4.2. That's 4.2 feet. And so it's a good 3.5, 4 feet below the elevation of Weed Beach. So this is a particularly low-lying area. We know this because we see it flood all the time. We certainly see it flood during coastal storm events. We see it flood during nor'easters. We see it flood when there's a brisk wind out of the east, pushing water into Long Island Sound. But we also see it flood just by virtue of the standard lunar tide cycle. So when you look at just the plain old regular tide cycle, not taking into account sea level rise, not taking into account storm events, not taking into account weather, that lowest area of parking lot will flood. And we've looked at how frequently that occurs over the course of the year. So not every high tide comes to the same elevation. Mean high water is about 3.3, so mean high water is lower than that. It usually stays on the beach side of that curve. But high tides can vary plus or minus 2 feet from that elevation. So there are a number of times throughout the year that you've got a large and growing puddle at that location. In fact, based on the 2020 tide research that we had done, about once a week, water would be above that catch basin grade, and about once a month, there's at least 6 inches of water above that catch basin grade. So that seems tolerable. It's a nuisance, but it's tolerable. But if we go, that catch basin in the low point presents a couple of maintenance problems, let's say. So if we go to the next slide, and this is a picture from after a nor'easter, right around New Year's Day in 2020. So as soon as we do get a coastal storm event, the Long Island Sound wants to push the beach up and over that curve line. So this is actually taken right from that catch basin, looking up towards the bathhouse, and you can see a sandbar of 12 to 18 inches that formed during a storm event. And that's because this is low lying. This is how low it is. You don't see this at Wheat Beach, but because very low lying and vulnerable. You see it here. And in the next slide, we've actually learned that just the general configuration, yeah, that's the second picture, if you can zoom in. The general configuration of the parking lot is such that it's the low point for the drainage area that comes down the hill from Long Neck Point Road all the way to Pear Tree Road. There's a large 30-inch pipe that's supposed to discharge towards a boat ramp. But in a storm like Ida, which we learned does not fit in any of our pipes, all that water came rushing across the parking lot to low point, elevation 4.2, and you can see that back of that catch basin just on the left side of that photo, and it eroded out the beach. So whether water is coming in from the sound or going out to the sound, the configuration of the property is very vulnerable to the effects of storm events, and we know these storm events are dangerous. So if you want to go to the chart, I'll try to spend some time on this so you can understand what I'm trying to say here. But in addition, we do know that sea level is rising. So, for example, look at the tidal data for Bridgeport from 1970-ish and compare that to the tidal data in Bridgeport for 2019, and we see that we've already seen a 7-inch increase in the elevation of mean tide average over the year for those two comparisons. And we have a guidance document in the state of Connecticut called Circa, just get the name of that. So I think it's the Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation, and they did a deep dive on Long Island Sound, looking at historic sea level elevation, looking at all the various projections for how sea level will change moving into the future, and they have produced a recommendation, which the state has adopted, to plan coastal projects, assuming that there will be a sea level elevation increase of 20 inches between approximately year 2000 and year 2050. So we know that not only has sea level started to rise, but it's going to continue to rise, and it's not a linear relationship. It's going to continue to rise more quickly in the future than it has in the past. So what is currently just a bit of a nuisance in terms of maintenance at the beach is very likely to inhibit and prohibit the use of this property going forward. So what this chart is trying to do is show you 50 years ago how frequently water would start pooling in the lowest areas of the parking lot. And this is, again, without considering weather, without considering storm events. So that first column 50 years ago is the column, actually read differently before, but that's the column that said water elevation would exceed that catch basin grade 47 times over the course of a year. But in 2020, with that sea level rise that's already occurred, we're looking at more than twice a week water exceeding the elevation of that catch basin. And so once a month, you'll actually have a foot.
Oh, goodness.
That red band didn't go away for quite a while.
Has that band ever appeared in the past?
We haven't used this. This is the first time we're using it.
Oh. The go-to meeting?
In go-to meeting, I've never experienced that before.
Yeah, I mean,
But
like
I've never
how we
used
used to
it
use
here.
it all the time during COVID.
Right, but never here in this room
I see.
with this, yeah.
His screen is new.
With the pilot program.
Well, they just did it, Jen just did it very successfully, hybrid in upstairs in 206.
The same computer? Did you say you were getting a message about your storage on there?
No, there's a ban up there saying technical difficulty,
I think it's the
organizer.
Wi-Fi. I think the Wi-Fi
Oh,
is
it's
very,
bad in this room?
it's bad and
Well, George says it's strong. And like I said, we shared our screen, we did examples of it just last couple days, and we were like, it was good to go, felt good about it. But this didn't happen, none of this.
Full. The Wi-Fi's really good here.
Yeah, so it's probably the storage on your computer. That's what happens to me all the time. I have to dump out my trash, I have to dump, because the Zoom app takes a lot. And when you're sharing a screen, it takes a lot of your RAM memory to run.
no, this Wi-Fi is good. I can't, it says connecting, it's not, it's, I'm testing it now. I'm connected to it. It's the same one I'm connected to. Yeah, it's not working. The Wi-Fi's out in this room.
Really unconnected.
She's got 4 bars.
Okay, here we go.
On your Wi-Fi?
We're in for another
Yes,
couple
I'm using
minutes.
Wi-Fi from a laptop.
Yeah, it's not speed testing when I can't get to it.
Who is it?
Amy. Oh, she muted herself.
Here's Craig.
Go ahead, Craig.
Sorry.
Craig, I don't think it was you.
Well, it most likely will happen again, but we did have a decent stretch there, so if you want to start up again, Craig, let's go for it.
Yeah, maybe I'll get a good 10 minutes
5
out of
minutes
it,
in.
and we'll get to the end of the presentation.
There you go. Hang on. Thank you, Alice.
It's on the tables today, we'll move on. We'll try to come through quickly. So what the rest of the columns on this table do is now project different depths of sea level rise. So columns 3, 4, and 5 is what happens with 6 inches of sea level rise, 12 inches of sea level rise, and 20 inches of sea level rise. And just by virtue of the kind of sinusoidal shape of the way tides occur, again, it's not a linear relationship. It's an exponential relationship. So the frequency of flooding goes up exponentially with each incremental change in sea level rise. So, for example, with just another 6 inches of sea level rise, where you might have a foot of water there today, 12 inches of water once a month, 15 times a year, you're going to have that once a week, 47 times a year, with just 6 inches of sea level rise. And then you can project that out with 12 inches, so it goes from once a month to once a week to once every 3 days, a foot of water there. And occasionally 2 feet of water there. So what again is today probably a tolerable nuisance will turn into something that starts taking away the parking lot and taking away the beach. And, we will be ceding this park to the sea. So if we want to avoid that, the only way out is elevating it and effectively buying time. So this is a graphic that demonstrates current conditions.
And Craig, the conditions you're describing will occur on sunny days as well as rainy days.
Yep, this is just the tide. So it's worth noting when you compare the predicted tide. I did this for, again, 2019, the last full year I had when we did this analysis in 2020. When you compared the predicted tides to the actually observed tides, this is again from the Bridgeport data, there were 60 times during the year that the predicted high tide elevation was exceeded. So that's when we start getting into weather events. Even a light breeze out of the east will push water up Long Island Sound, and Long Island Sound is a very specific geography. It's like the Bay of Fundy. It's a long inlet that gets narrower at the end, and so water builds up. And so if you get wind pushing into Long Island Sound, it will exceed normal tides. But everything I'm talking about right now is just basic tide. It's not even storm events. But you could even have a gentle breeze on a sunny day that you're at the beach enjoying, and that's actually having an impact on making tide. But this exhibit shows you what happens under existing conditions around that low point, and the different gradations in color are meant to indicate the frequency that these areas will pond, with that largest, lightest yellow area being the kind of once a month or less than once a month level. But if you now take this graphic and go to the next one, it shows you what happens with just 12 inches of sea level rise. So you can now see that brighter red area towards the middle is flooding more than 10 times a month. And then going in, basically the entire parking lot starts to flood once a month, based on the normal tide cycle, which is 12 inches of sea level rise. So this is going to happen. It's just a matter of when it happens. So we see executing the permit documents that we got approved as critical to preserving the town's access to this park. And so the next page is a little harder to see in a presentation. This is just one of the pages from the 300-page application, and it shows how the parking lot will be filled. And there's an important piece to it. So the first important piece is that the lowest drain now goes from elevation 4.2 to elevation 6.2, and it's replaced, instead of one drain, it's 3 drains in the middle of the parking lot. So we buy 2 feet at the lowest elevation. But the other important part about the way this was designed is that along the curb line with the back beach, the elevation is actually higher. That's a higher ridge or elevation. So now the curb is not a low point. So for instance, when we have that idle-like event, water is not going to be pouring over that curb and carpeting out the beach like it did last year. And so we have, we go up from 6.2 towards the curb to elevation 6.6. The curb is 6 inches tall, so the top of curb ends up being elevation 7.1, which is a good 2.5, 2 to 2.5 feet above the elevation of the lowest point of the top curve today. And it's actually a very substantial curve. It's not a typical city street curve. It is really an erosion control structure. It's a very beefy curve designed to withstand the effects of coastal storms going forward. So just by virtue that this is elevated by 2 feet will significantly decrease impacts during many coastal storms. Obviously, there's always a coastal storm that's bigger, that may come down the pipe, that will overtop even this curve, that will cause the need for maintenance, that will cause flooding, but you can imagine that if you buy 2 feet, it's going to happen a lot less frequently. So again, stepping away from coastal storms and the vulnerabilities associated with those, and just going back and looking at these normal tide cycles. Next slide. This, again, similar exhibit shows you, based on our current sea level elevation and our current tide cycle, how frequently the parking lot will flood in normal tides if the work is put in place. And the answer is 0. It will not at all flood over the course of an entire year based on the normal tide cycle. But we also looked at, and actually, Dan, I think the next slide is probably obsolete and outdated because it was based on an earlier design of the parking lot and the grading. So I think it's actually much less than this. But it certainly looked at, if we had, it was 12 inches of sea level rise, how frequently you might see flooding in the parking lot. But you're down to now, even with 12 inches of sea level rise after the project is implemented, less than once a month. And so the probability of that once a month happening on a summer weekend, when you need the parking lot, is significantly reduced. But again, I think this slide would be a slide that if we get farther down the road, we might want to update to reflect the current, the actual approved rating. And that's that's the why behind it. And so the Army Corps and the DEP approved this application, recognizing that we have to start rethinking how we're going to deal with coastal properties moving into a future of sea level rise and what coastal resiliency means. So this is putting the infrastructure in the right place. And it also has the benefit of, you know, more beach at a higher elevation. So you know that back beach, even today, you go on one of those higher high tide days, you know, sometimes you don't even have room to put a beach towel down between the curb and the water. And this moves that curb line back, you know, 18 feet or so, and gets to that whole edge of the beach up at a higher elevation. So there's actually more usable area.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, that was very, very helpful. Get it down.
You know, if I can just make maybe one other comment here, or kind of a couple of closing comments, at least on our part, and thanks Craig and thanks Dan. There's a few takeaways that I guess I'd like to offer up to the commission. One is the process that we went through to ultimately be awarded this certificate of permission was, I guess, I don't want to be too hyperbolic here, but very, very rigorous. And it included a whole series of gates and deep analysis. And, maybe it took, the 2.5 years that it took because of COVID, but my guess is, it would have been shorter, but it's a lengthy process. And the reason it's lengthy is because there are a lot of government agencies that are involved. And they have very, very high standards for granting the type of, the permission for the type of project that we requested. And as Craig pointed out, we actually even went beyond, their standard in terms of what they typically would allow for by asking for the parking lot to be raised to the extent that it's raised. So in a way, they set a precedent, with their own standards based upon the engineering analysis. So A, it was difficult. B, I'd ask you to just take away an appreciation for the depth and a level of excellence of the engineering, exercise that was undertaken by Weston and Sampson, by Redness and me, with the contributions from Race. My personal view here, because I'll offer it up now since, you stuck with me here for the moment, is, the town's blessed with, 2 wonderful beaches. As Craig's pointed out, and we didn't go through a couple of slides here, but, on one hand, Petrie has been resilient. We have aerial photos of Petrie going back to the 1930s, showing that the beach, the way it looks today, essentially looks the way it did back in the 1930s. Having said that, we all know things are changing. Kind of climatic forces are kind of, creating different effects, different dynamics, and as Craig's pointed out, I don't think, past in this case is not prologue for the future. So, we know that things will change. So here we are, we're sitting here with an opportunity. There's been a lot of homework that's been done. We have these 2 wonderful treasures, and there's a roadmap to preserve this particular beach. And I think what we're saying here coming out of this analysis is if nothing's done, it would be a shame. And from my perspective. So the only, other ask I would make is, consider it seriously. I believe, the building committee, over the course of the 4 years that it was in operation, had the opportunity and the privilege of doing some very serious work, with the result of preserving, a wonderful amenity in the community. It's over to you guys now. It's over to the town now. We're still here to fall back on, but I think, if there are questions, you don't necessarily need to ask them this evening, but we're here to answer any questions you have. But I'm guessing you're probably not going to come up with any questions that Kinetic Heat or the Army Corps or the Environmental Protection Administration hasn't already come up with. So, we're happy to kind of respond to anything
Yeah, actually,
that comes up here. So, with that, Lori, I'll turn it over to you. And I just a great deal of appreciation for the team that, worked through all this over the course of, and kind of the stick-to-itiveness. And Dan, to you for kind of guiding us through this process. There were many, many moments when, the line at the end there, the other end of the phone line went silent with Kinetic Heat. And it was through Dan's kind of artfulness that we were able to keep the thing going here. So with that, Lori, I'll turn it over to you. And if you have any questions for us this evening or in the future, just, we're here.
Yeah, I have a new question for Dan and Craig. The approval is for 5 years, and this is a hypothetical question, but if we were to not schedule this, say, for 4 years, and during that time period, there was a significant storm which really damaged the beach and or the parking lot, would that change this approval in any way, or would it make it more difficult to do the construction as designed? I'm trying to get at, if we wait and something happens that really does some damage, how does it, or does it, change this approval?
I would say that if there was a significant event that damaged the current setting, I think one is that you have in your hands the permission to enact improvements now, even as an emergency response if necessary. So as long as you're constructing within the parameters of the permit, I would not see an issue. Now, if you're looking to do other improvements beyond that, I think there is a good chance that we could go back to talk to the state to ask for almost a emergency response solution if necessary, because of something that's not included in this, to be included or to be allowed. I think that could be warranted. I think that's really a one-time situation to go to them for those circumstances, but what you have in your hands is really permission to work on this site, approvals from the state and the federal agencies as well, which they do want to see improvements made to things that they permit. So sooner is better than later. And as I mentioned, if you don't enact these improvements within the 5-year period, you can apply for an extension, but I don't know if you would get more than one extension just due to knowing the circumstances of climate change and what's happening within a 5-year period.
Okay, but it doesn't sound like you envision, it's very inarticulate. Is there something that could happen to the parcel that would make this plan of work to remediate it unachievable, or not really?
I don't foresee that. Craig, I don't know if you have any thoughts as well, but I don't see anything that...
Yeah, I don't foresee that. I don't think you're going to have a storm so large that it totally obliterates it. I don't see that happening. Okay. It'll just be underwater, water will move around, things will move around. You might get erosional channels and depositions, and you might have some structural damage. But generally, and this was part of the analysis that Race has done, the coastal engineer that Mike referred to, because this is a fairly well protected location deep in this inlet, protected on both sides by land. You really need wind coming straight from the south to generate the most significant wave action, and even then your back beach is in line with that, not opposing it. So what Race found was that it although beaches are by their very nature ephemeral and they move, but this was a fairly stable one given its location.
Okay, that's helpful. Other commissioners, questions? Susan?
Susan Daly. Thank you, Dan and Craig and Mike and your committee for all you've done to get us here. I mean, it was definitely looked like a lot of work, very thorough, and it looks really great. Like just the idea of preserving a piece of the beach, it sounds like, and raising that parking lot so it's more usable in all types of situations. I guess my question is about how much is there a figure that we're looking at in terms of how much this is gonna cost? Because, I see it as a very worthwhile project, because, being able to use the beach and using that parking lot, and making the property more resilient is really key. But I also wanna know what we're looking at in terms of costs.
Dan and I chatted the other day in preparation for this meeting, and it's hard for them to know because we know
Yeah.
prices move. But Dan, when you and I chatted, your kind of rough back of the envelope estimate, I promised him I wouldn't hold him to this in any way, shape, or form, but he felt probably no less than 3 million and probably no more than 5 million. But that was is that accurate, Dan? But that was a very rough.
And that includes the entire COP aspects, which is the boat ramp, the parking area, the dredging, which is a significant cost
All
for
the
sure,
dredging.
in terms of removing the sediment. A component of the COP is that you cannot dispose of the sediment that's being dredged into the offshore disposal areas. So any dredged material would have to be extracted, dried, and removed off-site for disposal at a proper disposal facility. And that is going to be a decent cost to this project.
And all
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, Lori, I apologize for cutting you, I'm just gonna weigh in here. We still have a building committee in place, and as chair, co-chair of the building committee, I just wanna go on record as saying, I'm against any discussion of numbers until we have an understanding of timeline. Like, when are we talking about this? If we had planned on doing this back in 2020 in the height of COVID, you've got one number. If we're talking about doing it now with supply chain issues, you've got another number. So my view, and I would just ask you, erase your memory of whatever number was just discussed, only because I don't really care, but you guys will get in trouble discussing that number. This is a little bit of the cart and the horse issue. We need to understand when the town is serious about proceeding with it, that's the point at which you start to develop numbers. Because up until that point, and with all due respect to Dan, I know, Dan, you were asked, and and Lori, due respect to you as well. Unless you're talking about doing it now in the next 6 months, you can forget that number.
But we don't know. That's why we're going to be sitting here for a few hours this evening, putting together the capital request budget. We have to have a number to stick in there to at least start putting, an order of magnitude.
Well, then I think you've got to come back to the building committee and tell the building committee, direct the building committee to work up the number for you. Because doing it in the way that you've just done it back of the envelope is a disservice to the process.
No, I understand, Mike, but we need, I feel that we need to have some order of magnitude, is it $1 million, is it 20 million, I mean, whatever, you have to have some.
No, that's fair. I'm just saying, come back to the building committee and, we'll move ahead with the process of building an estimate for you.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to point out, that includes the dredging all the way up from the boat ramp, up and around the boat club docks that are closest to Pear Tree Point, and up and around and down the other side, correct, Dan?
That's correct. That's
Right.
within permit.
That's within permit. Now, for the purposes of this commission, we could just say, we need the dredging done to finish the boat ramp and make it workable, but then whether the town wants to do the rest of the dredging, the boat club's gonna have to get involved and whatever, and,
Well, just to your point, Lori, and just a note to the rest of the commission, I'm not sure if everybody is aware of this. When we went through the whole settlement sampling process and the analysis of the sediments, it was called out that some of that area that was called out for dredging contained sediments that were higher in contaminants than were allowable for deposition in the sound, which means if that weren't the case, we'd be able to deposit those sediments in the sound at no cost to the town. And it's a much more straightforward process, and obviously a cost-free process, with the exception of the process of just what it takes to get it there. But because when we put the application in, we defined an area for dredging that went beyond what's necessary to do anything that we're talking about within the remit of the building committee. And the reason we did that is at the request of the boat club, we were, there was a discussion that was essentially went like, if we're at it and we're gonna go for permission, let's just ask for permission to do all of this area. So that's what we put in the application. We ended up calling out an area beyond, once again, the area that applies to us for dredging that does contain contaminants. So the number that Dan just gave you is a number that, to accommodate the disposal of sediments that are contaminated, that would have to be disposed of at a very, very high cost and a much more complex process. So that's the danger of just having a number out there
No, I
without
understand.
clearly understanding what the number is.
Kathy?
Sure, and thank you
Loud.
all. Okay, thank you all for your incredible presentation. Pear Tree Point Beach is an incredible asset to our community, and to preserve it really is a key issue for our town. I wanted to ask if you had any sense of timing of how long the project would take, and whether the building committee had really scoped out that, thinking through some of those issues, whether it's good to do this over 1 to 2 to 3 years from a budget perspective as well.
Yeah.
I know I'm here late in the day, I wasn't involved when this project was first started, so it'd be great to have that background.
Yeah, I asked Dan about that as well in preparation for the meeting, and he'll jump in, but Dan felt that this was a project that the building period would be about 6 to 9 months. So it could be done within one budget year, and ideally, Dan, what we talked about is you would start maybe September, literally just close the beach, just the property just gets closed down to the public, and in theory, if all went smoothly, it could be ready for the next beach season.
I think a couple things to note on that is this site, compared to your other beach, you would lose access for a bit of this parcel during construction in order to rebuild the parking lot, in order to have the dredging spoils the water potentially. So the timing of when you actually start the project to complete needs to be in line with the use of the boat ramp or use of the docks for the boat club. So that cycle is really critical, and I would expect you to have a closure period of this site in order to build and to utilize it for all these improvements in COP, if that's the path forward.
Other questions? Amy, questions?
By the way, let me just, I'm sorry to kind of be this quick, one other point here. That's 6 to 9 months from having identified, gone through a bidding process, having identified, a contractor or, a group that would do the work for us. We have to get competitive bids.
Yeah, understood.
And by the way, that process could take 3 to 4 months.
Right. Amy, any questions? She's on mute. Give her a chance. Okay. Other questions? Okay. All right, well, this has been extremely helpful. Again, our most heartfelt thanks to Mike and Randy and the building committee, Craig, Dan, and all the support people who really worked through this incredibly complex project for a small piece of property. When you hear about the size of the application, the technical detail that went into it, it's just been an amazing amount of work to bring us to this point, and we are so appreciative for all of your efforts.
It's been a privilege. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Greg. Thanks,
Thank you
Dan.
very much.
Everybody, sorry for
Good
the
night, guys.
technical difficulties.
It seems like the technical difficulties are working right now without our camera
Without
on.
the camera on, so they can't see us.
Is it okay from a process standpoint for them not to say yes? I don't know what the rules are for our meetings.
Well,
These are my
at
questions.
least there's TV 79 as
Yeah,
as a backup.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
I think it would be,
it's fine.
that would be questionable if TV 79 wasn't here.
Okay.
Right.
But the fact that they can hear us is great.
Yeah.
And I think even with the other presentation, if we minimize that, and then I can scroll through the presentation,
Okay.
but they should still be able to hear us even if it's on the bar. Because I'm not gonna close the meeting.
Right, they should be able to see the presentation.
Minimize, yeah.
Yep, okay, all right, well then let's move into the summary of the standards of care assessments that we all completed. Cara did a wonderful job
Thank you.
survey monkeying us and gathering all of the information and making us some nice bar charts and et cetera, or chart.
So now the people around here won't see it unless I share my screen, and then we might run into that technical difficulty.
So I
again.
would say we shouldn't share it because we did distribute it ahead of time.
Right.
So I think if people,
Fine.
yeah, so I think.
Well, I just
we're-
thought that if we did share it, then TV 79 would at least see it.
Oh,
Whereas everybody already got it.
yes. I would say let's not risk having a technical difficulty since it's.
Well, what I meant is if I minimize the screen and we don't look at their squares, they still can hear us, but I could then put your,
Oh, yeah.
then I can put it up on
So
the
it's
screen.
recorded.
Before it's recorded.
Perfect, okay, good suggestion, fabulous.
All right, so everybody on virtually won't be able to see the screen because I'm not going to share my screen and risk that we might lose the session, but you'll be able to hear us. And Channel 79 will be able to have access to the presentation. Okay, is this the one?
That's the one,
Okay, I was gonna
absolutely.
say.
Did I look like, ooh, I'm
Yes,
really
you
tired
did.
already tonight, guys. So anyway, I'm really happy to be able to share this, especially because I think it might have some bearing on our budget requests. I also am cognizant that it's 8:48, so I will endeavor to be efficient, especially since I sent this around last night. Just
Sorry to interrupt, do you want to put it in presentation mode, just so it's bigger for us?
How do I do that?
Slideshow.
Sorry?
Slideshow.
Yeah, just put
Right,
slideshow.
right.
Then from the beginning.
From the beginning,
Far left.
on the left side.
Yeah, perfect.
Got it.
Yay, excellent, okay. All right, so I'm just gonna really hit the wave tops on this. We obviously adopted standards of care for our parks last year with the goal that we maintain them at a high and uniform standard. The purpose of our annual assessment is to identify where as a group we think we are meeting those standards and where we're falling short so that we can synchronize with the budget so we address them. I am super grateful and very thrilled by how many people provided input to this year's assessment. We had 18 people in total, so 8 commissioners, 8 of our 9 commissioners, and 10 of the 12, right, Adele? RTM Parks and Rec committee members.
Hey,
Yes?
Cara,
Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's very hard to hear you.
Okay. I'm gonna look up at the mic. Is that any better?
Is it the mic?
Wait, where's the mic?
Maybe it's either up by the screen.
Yes, we can hear you, Cara, thank you.
You can hear me? Okay, I don't really know where I'm supposed
So
to be
Amy,
looking.
maybe you need to turn up the mic.
I think it's up here too. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna look more at the ceiling, everybody. Okay. So I'm glad everybody had this last night. If you now turn to page 3, this is sort of the most important slide in the whole deck. The way this works, the elements on the standard of care are on the left. Along the top row are our various parks. Each number in the cell represents the average rating. We used a 1 through 5 scale, so 1 is the best. That means we exceed our own standards. 5 is the worst. It means that we have a lot of work to do to meet our standards. To make this digestible, I've color-coded it. If it's green, that means that we exceed the standards. So the first thing that I think everybody will see is there's a lot of green here. So overall, the parks are really in great shape. The second color would be the yellow boxes. Those are areas where we don't meet our own standards or we don't think we meet our own standards. But this, I'd say, is sort of a bad news, good news story. So if you start on the top left and look at Baker, Cherry, McGuan, we have 2 playgrounds and the Cherry Lawn gazebo. Those 3 yellow squares have initiatives that are spec'd out and funded. So one would expect that by next year, those will flip to green. Similarly, if you go to Pear Tree, which is the only park that doesn't meet our standards of care in any area, if the commission and the Board of Selectmen chooses to move forward with the course of action that the working group put forward, one would also, and fund it, expect that many of those would also turn to green. And then last, if we look at the bottom line, which is ADA compliance, which has a lot of yellow, and I think we spoke about this last year. I think that a lot of these reflect not meeting our standards, because I think there might be confusion over what the exact standard is. So, for example, is the standard that Selleck Woods is accessible in a wheelchair? Or, so I think that's why this might just need a separate understanding of what our standard should be.
Just to interrupt for a moment, something
Yes.
just occurred to me that I wish I
Yes.
thought of it.
Before,
Years ago.
but that's okay, thinking of it now.
It's possible we shouldn't say ADA compliance because we don't want to imply we're not. We are compliant with the
compliant.
law. It's more,
It's like accessibility.
it's accessibility.
Yep, great point.
You know,
So, yeah.
And then, and are the points, the higher the points are, the yellower they get?
Yes, so yellow is bad, green is good.
Right, but then
Yes.
the points, the rating, the actual rating numbers are actually higher? Or
Yes,
no?
because
one
one
is
is the best, 5 is the worst.
I see, so when we say average rating below 3.4, then physical number is actually more than 3.4.
Yes.
For yellow, I guess.
Yes, oh, did I put the,
You
yes,
did
I put
less
the,
than, the less than,
it needs to be greater than.
right.
Just switch it around. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, good catch on that. So, but I think the
An
ones
average
that are
rating would be like average rating 3.0 minus as opposed to
Yes.
plus, right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly, exactly, yeah. But the color coding is accurate.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then an ADA accessibility, I think it's just, we probably should think about, like, is a nature center something that it will be accessible? Or is Selleck, or only parts of it will be accessible? It's really a question for all of us to think about.
How we think about it.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
We just need to have a, to your point, it's not, we are compliant, but we need to define what the standard is that we
Yeah.
have for ourselves.
And how we like to think about the parks as we develop them in terms of making them more accessible and being mindful of that, whether it's putting, you know, the rollout mats down the beaches for the water, things of that nature. But yeah, we probably should think about rewording that.
Really great,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Okay, so turning to page 4, this was a new question and it was an open-ended question. I said, what do you think should be the top 3 priorities for the Parks and Rec Commission? Again, perhaps maybe I will reword this question next year because in all honesty, I think that there were a lot of answers that came back. There were a lot of one-off suggestions, but some of the things that came through, Pear Tree had the most number of people saying that should be one of our top priorities, and that's not super surprising. I was a little surprised that invasive management and native plants was the next most frequently recommended thing, especially because if you look on the prior page, it was an area that we thought we were deficient, but I guess in vogue. And then the Short Lane Weed Beach project, I feel like the water cooler chat is that people are really amped up about it, but for whatever reason, it wasn't something that a majority of people mentioned in the top priorities. So I'm just reporting back what you reported to me on the top priorities. But I think the reason why the question's valid or the concept is valid is we have limited human resources and financial resources, so the more that we're aligned on what our top priorities are, the more impact we'll have. Okay, so turning to page 5, I'm now just going to summarize some of the key points that came through in the verbal comments or the open-ended comments. Pear Tree, only a park that doesn't meet any of our standards of care. However, we do have at least a proposal to address those gaps, so if that's approved and funded, we should see progress against those. And then again, just the action plan that the working group recommended we all know this, so I'm not going to read through all of those, but I do just want to note that there weren't any comments that suggested we shouldn't proceed with this. So, and in fact, most of the comments said, do it quickly, do it now. Moving to Weed Beach, lots of comments that the new painting looks great. Overall, the park's in great shape and really beautiful. Many people are really excited about the short lane project. 6 out of 11 mentioned it in their comments. There were some comments that the overall design of the project might be more successful if we socialize it to both build support for the project and understand if there's any opposition before people get too wedded to a particular project or particular plan. Some of the other suggestions that might impact or would impact the capital budget, a number of people mentioned the tennis backboard. I don't know why I wrote backstop, I think it's backboard. And then some of the other items could be considered in the operating budget. And if I'm talking too quickly, let me know, but I'm cognizant of the time. Cherry Lawn overall looks really good. A lot of gratitude for the tennis courts, the new pickleball courts, the basketball courts. Super excited about the new playground. Some of the comments were a sensitivity to adding new programming, given the parking bottlenecks, and we've heard that before. Wonderful that the gazebo roof is getting repaired, and I'll just call it out here, but I think that there were a couple of comments that would be great to stay on top of the facilities we have, and a sensitivity when things cross over into the state of disrepair. On the native trees, a request that we hold off on any new plantings until there's a design for how they'll be placed and a plan for how they would be watered. And then the most recent capital budget includes money for an aerator and dredging. And there was, I'm not sure if the dredging is the same as removing the trees, but that was something that was specifically recommended for the pond. Baker, overall in good shape. People are excited about the coming playground and some maintenance items. Specific one around the fence near the batting cage, and there is a sensitivity to having matching picnic furniture at our parks is something that a number of comments, however we can move it around, is something that feels appropriate for Darien. Moving to Mugwan, again, great job that so much has happened over the past year. People are really excited about the playground. Some comments about at some point in the future needing to have a more significant approach to shade, given that the little roofs on the play structure and any new trees won't provide significant shade. There are a couple of either maintenance or capital projects, noting buckling in concrete, maintenance needed on the patio, and a suggestion that Mugwan will need painting at some point in the future. I think I'm covering only two other parks because the other ones didn't have enough comment. Selleck's Woods, complete gratitude to Chris Fulmer for having that park be in such great shape. Looking for a plan with respect to invasives going forward. And Tilly Pond, thrilled to have geese relief back. The aerator made a huge difference, and a number of comments about the upcoming stone maintenance that will be needed, which I think now is in the capital budget for at least by the hut. And then somebody called out the wall by the Girl Scout garden as potentially also needing stone maintenance work. So those were the comments, and then if we just go to the last page, just as we think about the budget, thinking about adding money into the capital maintenance budget for Pear Tree Point Beach, given it's the one that doesn't meet our standards of care. Considering a socialization plan for Weed Beach. I think the woodland parking's already been removed. That didn't pop as an item of huge concern. And then other items for the capital, we've talked about the tennis backboard, the Mugwan patio. I feel like I'm cruising through this. A few items to add to the operating budget, and really a focus on making sure that there's ample maintenance dollars to make sure that our facilities don't fall into disrepair. And I think we've talked about accessibility. So that's it. I'm happy if anybody has any questions, either on the process or the findings.
Great job.
My pleasure. You guys did the work. I just been reporting on it.
Yeah,
So,
still
I
a
don't
lot to
think
pull
so.
together.
Yeah, I don't think so
Pardon?
either. It's a lot of work.
oh, well, thank you.
It's a lot of work.
Thank you. But I hope it helps inform the way we approach the budget, was the goal.
It does, and what I also really like about it is that as we move through the budget process and have to, Pam meets with Kate, as Pam and I, meet with the selectmen, Board of Finance, as we're kind of pleading our case for budget dollars for the parks, having these visuals and these assessments, I think really helps. That we have the view of, the two primary, groups in the town who are charged with the oversight, of the parks, being the commission and the RTM committee that, are champions for the parks, and really, showing that we're largely in alignment, in terms of how people view the parks and where we need to go and what needs to be done. And I think, showing that we've done that homework in a quantifiable way is really very powerful, for us to, as opposed to just say, well, we think we need this, we think we that, we're hearing the same messaging kind of year over year.
Yep.
Too. So. And I also think it actually shows that, aside from these, couple projects that, we're talking about, the parks are actually gonna be in pretty, going to be in good shape if we can really chop through those remaining pieces. Then it really is maintenance until, at some point we go back and revisit the master plan and say, okay, what are some other elements that we feel like we would like to find a way to address? But it feels like there wouldn't be any gaping holes.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's not like we have like tons of yellow here, where it's just like, oh boy, all the parks really are terrible. I mean, I had a lovely walk through Diller. I just thought it looked fabulous. It was it was really nice shape. Really nice shape. So, very pleasant. Okay, cool. All right, then I think with that, we can go into the budget discussion. So we think everybody on the line can still hear us, as far as we know?
Yep.
We haven't heard otherwise?
No.
Okay. So we're going to do...
Capital.
Capital first. Okay, since we're talking about capital.
All right, so this shouldn't be any surprise to anybody, since I did share this with everybody last month. A few questions. I mean, the dredging of Cherry Lawn isn't until 24-25. And also, when you discussed stone hut repairs, I don't have that in here until 26-27. That was basically a number from Sue, the previous director. Susan, I know you had a question about how it looked. It didn't look pleasingly, aesthetically pleasing with the
There were a
path.
couple of things with the stone hut. There's actually graffiti in the roof. It's all, I think I took pictures that I sent them to you. There's a lot of writing on the top.
Yeah, I noticed
On the
that.
inside?
Yeah.
Inside, okay,
Yeah,
so I
you
can
can see
I
it
can have the guys
overlay.
adjust that, that's not a problem.
It's not that it wasn't pleasing, we just had that whole space redone, like all that asphalt laid
Right,
out.
right.
And the guy made it so that it's like, looks like, one of the visitors who was doing the signage said that it looks like teeth. It looks like, it's like jagged.
Right,
And
right.
when you do stonework, when it meets something, it's usually a nice straight edge.
But is that the stonework that we're talking about in the?
I don't know,
I don't know.
I was talking about the stonework on the floor. I don't know if your thing might be the building itself, which is like, because at any some time you need to maintain a stone building.
Right.
So I was actually calling out the contractor that worked on it to have
Right.
you go back to him and say, that should have been cut as a straight edge.
We
with
did, but we
asphalt."
haven't heard back from him. So,
Okay,
yeah, so we have him for a couple different, steering construction,
yeah,
and Sandy's been trying to reach him for another,
Yeah.
even the concrete work over at McGuan, which we've moved on now, because Deering is so busy right now with the road, and they have a whole project
yeah,
with
no,
all the
it's not-
sidewalks,
yeah,
so.
yeah, it's not-
And what happens too, and I've dealt with this with Deering before, is that they're so busy that it's almost aggravating that they have to come out to give numbers when they're not even sure they're gonna get the work.
No,
So that, I see that, that's happened
So I
in the
think the
past.
stone hut is different than the work that was
Yeah.
already contracted that we're asking them to
Okay.
fix so that it looks.
Okay.
So what is that 40,000 that's in for 26, 27?
That 40,000 was before I was even here, and it was $40,000 for stone hut repairs. I don't know what that was, and so we just keep pushing it out because we're like, we don't see any stone hut
I don't think I
repairs.
put it in there then, if you
Yeah.
don't even know what it is, I don't want something in the budget.
So we pushed it out thinking that, again, like Susan said, I mean, maybe years down the road, we will have some, need to take a look at it down the road. I didn't think it hurt to keep it in the 6-year plan, but,
It might
Just
be
so that
more
we
of a
understand.
maintenance thing versus a
and it keeps
repair.
us,
Like, what
into-
would happen if it's a maintenance thing and really isn't 40,000, it's really like, we need to repoint some of the stone.
Mhm.
What is that? Is that capital that we have to do that, or is that another type of thing? I don't know.
Jen has said that anything over 5,000 is
Yeah,
capital.
So like, repointing the stone is gonna be a lot of money, so it's gonna be more.
right. So we'll start with what we have here. So, the solar pond aerator did not have to do with dredging. That solar pond aerator was solely because of the algae that's growing on top and, allowing for us to give that pond cleaner air quality and water quality. And thankfully, when we were walking the property, that's when we all talked about, hey, maybe we can find something solar, which is great, because what was really holding us up there was the amount of money it would take to provide electricity from the bathhouse all the way down to the pond, and that was really what was tripping us up. So this 18,000 will include installation as well as the unit itself. And I have, based on the priority map matrix is how I came up with I wasn't sure whether they wanted the BM one. I reached out to Jen over the weekend when I was working on it, and she said, really, its priority is the number. So it becomes a number one priority. Evaluation of 3 Little League fields. I did include the company and the quote for this $15,000 work. Sandy is very interested in this project because while he's been here and while these fields were first created, which was over 20 years ago, they've never been evaluated. And he definitely feels there's some renovations that's needed, but they don't have the expertise to know exactly what those renovations are. So he feels that this $15,000 evaluation would be extremely helpful for us moving forward. As mentioned in the evaluation quote, that some areas of some of the fields, they're 8 inches taller on the mound than they are to the outfield. And so just simple things like that that came out of just the quote, he feels that this would be very valuable to the town.
And probably obvious, but have we spoken with the coaches of Little League? Because it would seem like just getting some feedback from the people who are playing.
They've been working with Little League. Sandy's been working with Little League.
And Little
on
League
this.
is saying the
Yes.
field is no longer working for us.
Well, after all these years of wear and tear and
Yeah.
lots of little feet running all
Right.
over this, ultimately the grade changes. So with storms and so our guys can only do so much to keep maintaining it the way it is, but the grade has changed so much. So Sandy would really like to get it back to good grade, like grading, which is professional grade, safe grade, and then they can continue maintaining from there.
Do they partner with us on some of this? Because, just from my years of being on the
Yeah.
commission, I know that typically they help with a lot of, just because they're the end users.
I bet they would.
That's just
I
my-
have not approached Sean on that,
Yeah, because
but I'm more than willing to.
do we, I know we talk about this here and there, about the fees that are paid when they do registration. Do we still get money from
We
that?
do.
So,
We get from Little League, it's $5 for every
so
registration.
how much does that amount to for the town?
I'd have to go back and get that.
I just think that it would be nice to show like how much we get from that and how much we spend on it, 'cause but with the idea that, just to know.
Right,
And
right.
also knowing that number has to also cover things like contribute to maintenance and
That's the reason
mowing
for it.
and, mowing. I know I saw your guys blowing the leaves. It's a lot of work to maintain that space.
Yeah.
But I think that, I know in the past, I haven't seen usually something in capital of that nature recently. And so I would just, you know, I think it's worth an ask to see if we can get some help with that, especially if that's a number 2 and we need it to get done.
I have no problem approaching Sean about that. And moving down, install irrigation valve. I did speak with Sandy yesterday, just get a little bit more detail on that. And this irrigation system has been in place since the 90s and needs to be, 15 different valves in this, in Holohan need to be repaired. So that's another one priority. The Meadow and Trail project. And again, this ended up being 3 just because of the priority matrix, which is expansion of existing and basically expands services, responsibilities offered by the town, improves quality of life. So it ended up putting it as a priority.
I looked at the gatehouse today. I drove by because I was taking
Yeah.
pictures, and who knew that it was also football ticket selling time? Anyway, there'd be a lot of people there. But I looked at the bottom, and it is pretty rusted.
It is, and I apologize because this screen, this smart screen, goes right to my desktop, which we're at now. Right before here, I had all the presentation, everything on my desktop in my office, and I came here and none of it was there. So I started loading it as quickly as I could for the meeting, but I couldn't get the pictures because I did take 5 different pictures. I can send them all to you later.
It's very
I think
rusted
you
on
already
the bottom.
sent them in the mail attachments
Yeah.
of one of,
Yeah,
where there was a
it looks-
picture.
I did, but I had Sandy take all the rust shots today.
They're really bad.
Oh,
The whole thing is rusted, the
Yeah.
whole
And
side.
it's not, and I also need to clarify with Sandy, I misunderstood. It's not underneath the rubber that you and I were looking at,
Yeah.
it's all along the border, like there's nothing left. He had to weld a piece of metal right underneath the gate door, because otherwise it would have been a gaping hole. So, in terms of the gate guard getting in, would have been like a big hole there. So he welded a piece of metal just to place there. I mean, you know, if we're talking about standards of care here,
Yeah.
you know, it's not a great presentation or as our entrance.
well, you and I have had time getting the door open because it's not
So that's
It's-
happened too,
I
they've
think
had
there's some
to fix
erosion.
the door.
It's taking place.
level or
It's metal.
something, but
It's
we
metal.
were,
And it's been before the project at Wheat Beach. So they
Yeah.
took that, which was,
Yeah, we moved it.
yep, and they moved the old
Because we
gatehouse
ran
currently,
out of
and they
yeah.
pulled it up.
We
Yeah.
pulled it up because we ran out, yeah.
So before then, what is your guess?
I
It's
don't
well
even
over
wanna-
20 years.
Yeah, I think it's before my time on the commission for sure.
So,
And can you submit those pictures with your budget so people understand the
of
conditions?
course,
Okay, great.
of course, yeah.
Okay, great.
So I took, actually, there might be, let me just see, because Jim Coglin also took pictures for me. Not seen that, none of them came over. But I can send those, that's easy enough.
Okay.
Okay, so he took the outside and Sandy went in today and took shots of just all the rust.
so he peeled back the rubber.
He did, there's only one spot because all of it's glued,
Okay.
but then he told, I had a different picture of what he had said.
Okay.
I thought he fixed the floor and then put the rubber on top. That's not the case. That's all glued there, but he did tear a piece, take a picture over there. But most of it's just on the perimeter and all the doorway of the facility. And he said, as he also said too, when you're in it, like we were, but he said there's so many soft points on the floor that you could feel. So I don't know if you and I actually noticed
We
that,
didn't
but
bounce.
we were, yeah. But anyway, so there's 50 there. Do I feel as if we had to wait one more year, is it a safety measure for the security guard? No, but it's a rusty mess. And it's been around for quite a long time.
But given this budget, it's July 1st, it wouldn't get replaced for this beach season anyway.
Right.
So it would really,
Right.
it's still gotta get to
Another one, yeah.
another
exactly
beach
right.
season.
So it's really putting it off 2 years if we don't do it this
Mhm.
year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
So.
and then if you
we're
push it
really-
out, then it's gonna be 4
I
years,
think
3 years.
it's, I don't even, I mean, I would love for it to make it to the next summer, but I'm not sure it will. But
Yeah,
it's gonna have to because
gonna
we
have
can't
to.
replace
yeah,
it.
it's pretty bad. Commercial freezer speaks for itself. We've had to put so much money into it.
Oh yeah, Patty just sent a picture.
Okay. Oh, right, right. It's terrible.
It looks pretty horrible.
It's, yeah.
Commercial freezer, we have been patching this for a long time. Rob didn't even charge us for it because it's that old. When we purchased all the equipment for $10,000, that was just a,
That was a give me.
that's a give.
Yeah.
So we do need to, I believe our concessionaire at one point lost a lot of frozen food in there too when it would, overnight it lost power. This particular summer, we did not have that happen, thank God, but we've been blowing a fan from the ceiling onto the freezer for better chance of it not failing. So that's just a no-brainer.
And sorry, was there a freezer that we could take from Pear Tree to move to Weed?
Not that large. They have
Not that
a
big.
single, and we have a triple over there.
Could we take the single and then add a double?
We could. But the commercial's still running, like, this commercial free, I could ask for $15,000, but the range is anywhere from like 8 to 20.
Okay,
Right.
but we should
But we could
make
do that.
use of what we've got here,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Because, you know, we did buy that equipment as well, so.
I guess once the commission decides they're absolutely not
Right.
going to have anything there, yes. Small capital, here's the $90,000 mower. So I had put in my, let's see if I grabbed it. I think originally when I sent, that's the proposed
What, the pictures of the mowers?
operating. No, originally Sandy had described the request as using the 11-year-old mower, but it's really not about the 11-year-old mower, it's about the 22-year-old mower. So we have a 22-year-old mower that's still kicking, but they constantly have to repair it. It's taking care of 16 acres at Highland.
Wow.
So that's really the mower that's replacing. The 11-year-old mower, however, does have 3,000 engine hours on it, which is a lot, but it's newer, and obviously that one will be the one that will be the backup mower. And we'll start, if we get this approved, then that one will be kicked over to Highland to start doing the 16 acres, and our new mower will be doing all the athletic fields.
So considering Highland's not within our budget requirements, would the town put in some money here too? For the 90
We
days?
are the town.
I know, but with other departments within the town, you agree that, you know, Highland is supposed to, is not really under Parks and Rec yet, we seem to be taking care of it, and you're not funded for it,
I
it doesn't seem
I
fair.
think the agreement, though, that we all morphed into was that Parks and Rec would be managing it. It's not considered a park, but that Parks and Rec would be managing it and would be scheduling it, and it is our responsibility.
Okay, and they
So-
think, and they will fund you for it too.
Well, we certainly are going to, I mean, $90,000, I mean, to replace a 22-year-old mower is very nice.
You know, I was looking at this, the Parks and Rec, you know, the article about trends or whatever.
Yes.
And there's something that caught my attention because it talks about the commercial mowing,
Are we off?
commercial
Somebody dropped.
mowing machine market is rapidly evolving with implications for Parks and Rec. Introduction of fully autonomous commercial mowers, like robot-driven, but they also said other manufacturers are working on similar fully electric zero-emission mowers that are projected to require for less maintenance internal. So, you know, I read that and I was like, oh, you know, should I have to spend a lot of money on a gasoline mower now if in, you know, a few years, you know, they could be coming out with electric mowers, but, you know, these are,
Something to consider.
you know, with a
Right.
22-year-old mower.
Right. Well, it's something to consider, even though we put this 90,000 in here. Doesn't mean that we can't do some research. I did just recently do a talk on smart parks at our quarterly meeting at Connecticut Recreation Parks Association with Jen Codlin, and just kind of getting a feeling for what other towns are doing when it comes to technology. And there are some that have electric mowers, and some that have electric robotic paint liners. So one particular director said that they use these robotic line painters when they originally do say a soccer field, but that it's quicker to hire to have his crew do it to reline them. But to establish the first line, the robotic one is great. So it's just interesting to see which towns are kind of, the electric cars, electric, it's happening.
It's just tricky when you're on the cusp and
Yes.
like you need something that's,
Right.
being put together with paste and scissors, but a few more years out, there's gonna be something that's more, fuel efficient and,
Right.
or not needing fuel.
Well, I can have that conversation and come back
But it's really,
and find out what the cost of those are, right?
And anecdotally, I did an electric mower for my house thinking I wanted to get ahead of the curve. And it's just not there right now. It's just, my son would have to put like ice bags onto the battery to keep it lasting a little bit longer. It would be great if the commercial ones were better, but,
I think
we are gonna have to go there.
That was one of the comments.
Yeah.
That it was too. Like, for instance, one of the park directors said, maybe at-home mowers, but commercial.
It's
It's
just,
different.
they're just
Okay.
not there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very true. Paint machine, I did provide pictures, or I think Sandy did about the paint, not that you could see much about it, but this definitely is a replacement, but they would use it, the old one, as much as they could until it completely breaks down, but they have been pouring money into it and spending on parts, keep fixing it. They use it all the time. Stump grinder, I think, it came in at this 3 due to the matrix, but it would be a smart purchase. We have so many stumps and,
Invasive trees.
yeah, I just think it would be
Global
a
warming.
really, really good, yeah.
It's gonna
And we continue to take down trees. We don't necessarily get the stumps removed because it's just so much more money. So it'll be a great savings. So that is what I have for capital.
Okay, so if we can look at maybe the out years, because, and it's what's in there, like driving like the bigger numbers, because really,
Well, I think it's important to look below too, the total.
right.
So obviously, the Weed Beach project is driving this 1.2. Without Weed Beach in there, you're looking at 231, which is completely,
We usually evened it out a little bit so that,
Mhm.
it's spread out over.
Right, and
years.
I take a look at that too, I'm trying to look, beyond that, and of course, even when we get to these years, obviously, there's probably more things we're just not thinking about, or not putting in, 6 years for, Cara, last time you asked me about why isn't anything in here for Pear Tree, and really because we were on hold.
Yeah.
We're
But
all on
we need to put
hold.
that, we need to put
We
that in
need to have
tonight.
2 line items in
Yeah.
there, right? One, just so that we're, from a planning standpoint, there's the site work, which to your
Yeah.
point,
Right, so I
there's,
can do that right
this is
now.
a 7-figure, and town might decide they don't wanna do it, but there's the site work and then there's the follow-up from the working group. And the
Well,
building
what is the-
committee was put on hold, so.
Mhm.
So-
So if you're saying site work, are you saying?
All right, so when I talked to Dan, I'll do both Weed Beach and Pear Tree. And, then the conversation was, Dan, if I said today, we're good to go. I got whatever money I need, we're good to go. Like, what's a timeline and when do you need money? I just wanted, because I thought for this discussion and how we populate this calendar and prioritize, we would need to understand that. So for weed, he said to finalize the plans and the construction bid package, to get it ready so that we can go out to bid, 2 to 3 months. And he said, about $15,000 is what they need. So you got a 2 to 3 month period there, then it goes out to bid, there's no more dollars, and that he said, 30 to 45 days. Contract about 30 days, he said, and then you get everybody on board, you have pre-construction meeting, you kind of set the schedule, and then he felt that the work at Weed could be done in about 6 months. So, in theory, you could be in and out in one fiscal year, or, I'm just putting it as an or, you could try to come up with the $15,000 in this fiscal year from somewhere, so that you're ready to kick it off in July, because that project, he said, you almost could do it during beach season because it's kind of out of the way. So I'm not saying this is how to prioritize, but just I'm trying to think about how you lay out, and when you need money when. It's like, when do we need to open our checkbook? For Pear Tree, He thinks he needs 3 to 4 months to do the, to finalize the design plan, you know, and get the bid package ready. He throws it longer, about $20,000. And then, again, the bid process 45 days, contract 30 days, pre-construction, and he thought the whole build period was about 6 to 9 months. So again, both within a calendar year. You know, he said, you know, again, I was like, Dan, I just want sort of order of magnitude
Yeah.
numbers.
I thought that was a reasonable question.
He said the dredging of that's probably $1 million, you know, $1 million. And then the parking lot, he said, was probably about, you know, $1 million. And then there's all the kind of other stuff. So those were sort of some of the
Can you
bigger.
repeat what the parking lot was, please? We couldn't hear. What's the parking lot?
Around $1 million. You know, again, these are very, you know, back of the envelope. Again, I just felt I needed order of magnitude. You know, what are we talking about here? So, just to think, you know, because I mean, this is in my mind, this is the big decision we have to make. Is, you know, how do we want to order this? It's not only the financial resources; it's also the human resources.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we can manage both projects at once. I think it's too much for Pam and her team on top of playgrounds and invasives and everything else we've tossed.
There's only so many hours in the day.
There's only so much hours, and Kate Bush, you know, cautioned me on that as well. She said, you know, you gotta be really cognizant of, you know, how much can be effectively managed at once, so.
Yep.
That's what we really need to be thinking about in terms of populating this in the schedule, and that's why I'm just interested in looking at the out years and what else is in there, and we don't really have anything else big in there.
Yeah.
Yep, and then we need to come up with some kind of numbers, because the numbers that Dan provided, the back of the envelope numbers, don't include anything for the bath house.
Correct.
And, you know, we talked about, you know, furniture, Adirondack chairs, things of that nature, so
Landscaping.
we need to
Yeah.
get that
But that I
in
feel
there.
would be the much lower numbers than, you know.
Site work?
Yeah.
By a lot.
So
Yep.
maybe it's a little bit more approachable,
Right.
and in terms of priority, obviously, you know.
Oh,
high,
absolutely.
so-
Do we have a ballpark for that though? I mean, I'm not trying to say, you know, one person has to do it, but how are we gonna say, this is what we wanna do, and say, well, here's a blank spot, it's a priority, but we don't have any, like, is this, like, I think we need to give them an idea, if it's a 6-figure, is it, I mean, you
Well,
know.
we're limited under FEMA as to how much we can spend, so
So-
maybe that's the number.
But maybe
Well,
we
that
populate that
would
number.
cover sort of external work for the building, so I
Right,
think the
yeah.
limit would be roughly 170. And then all the other things, the landscaping, the furniture, the.
The interior of the bathroom
Right.
is not covered, does not have to be covered by that.
That I think it can be under maintenance, because it's not
Yeah,
a
it's really
separate,
not.
you don't need a CO or you don't need a permit to do
Yeah.
that type of thing.
But it would still
So-
need to be in our capital number.
It would need to be in our capital, but it
Right.
wouldn't be part of the 170.
Right, yeah.
Um,
Dan did not think doing really much of anything in the way of landscaping ahead of the parking lot project made sense.
That's true.
He said there's gonna be too much site
Yeah.
work,
Yeah,
and
it all gets yanked out.
Yeah.
it's really gotta be done
Right.
at once.
But we could do the furniture.
Yeah, we
Um,
can do the
Yeah, 'cause I could
building.
remove, and the
Right.
building.
maintenance.
Yes.
But should we put a placeholder number that we think is realistic, that we can say, this is a priority, like 1, and say it's X number, I don't know what
Yeah.
it might be, but I just think we need a number. And I'm not saying it's the number that we wanna present that might cover, and hopefully will cover what we're thinking that will take care of the inside of the building.
I think we should have a placeholder, and I think Pam, I maybe would just push back a little bit on your comment that it's on hold, or that the building committee, we weren't sure what we were doing. I feel like we did, and you were part of it, a lot of work as a working group, and we had a unanimous recommendation. So either we can decide as a group that we don't want to move forward with that, but I'm not hearing that from anybody, so I think having a placeholder
Oh, no, I
makes
just meant in
sense.
the past. Meaning, yes, I mean, we had not been doing a lot to it because we were still kind of in this, like, what are we doing? And none of that work that you just did had been done. So
Right, but now that it's
moving,
done, I
going
just think we
forward,
need
right,
to have it
going forward,
here.
you guys
Yeah.
tell me what you want in here. I mean, this can be changed, nobody's holding anything to you tonight, you know, or,
So on this,
your
on the site
budget.
work, for instance, if we say, look, we want to get going on the bid package.
Right.
We know we need $20,000. So we
For the bid process.
Just for Dan and his team to say, okay, here's a bid package, so we can actually go out and.
Maybe you should put bid package there. It's not really the project. It's not just, it's the bid package for the site work, really.
Okay.
Because it would only be, what, $20,000?
That, I think the other problem with the work that the work group does is we just don't have a real number, right? Because, you know, that's something, Pam, I think you haven't had time to do yet, is.
right, no, and I don't know what that is, like,
What
for
vendors
instance,
would we even
you know,
approach?
when you look at the inside of the bathrooms, they've already been painted, we put new sinks in, we put new mirrors in, right? Everything's done except for the floor, so Sandy's gonna be painting the floors, but
But in the bathrooms, we talked about new dividers, we talked about new toilets, all new fixtures. So I think there are some
Do you think like
other,
100,000 would cover that? I'm just putting a number out because I want to put something there so that we have something we're thinking
these
about.
new dividers, are those concrete or are
no,
they?
the
just
stall
the
dividers.
stall
Stall,
dividers,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it, it's not
No,
concrete, it's.
They're not wood, they're.
So you don't.
The door, you go to use the
Yes.
site.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the door.
Door.
Installed.
The door. The separate dividers,
Stalls.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
curtains, whatever they might need.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is it like 100,000, 50,000? I mean, I'm not holding
I would
you.
ask Pam,
Yeah.
just.
I
wanna
would
put
not
that-
know that, I'd have to get a vendor to come out and do that, I would never know that off the top of my head. So I would do it like any other capital project, we'd have to get a vendor to come in, tell us exactly what the scope of work we want done, and we'd get a number.
Something goes out to bid, but I think we need to show
A placeholder.
a placeholder number so that we have something in the budget. Because that's what we always do, is we have our kind of the best guess. And then
Right.
when you go to bid, hopefully it's lower than the best guess. Otherwise, we have to ask for more money, and that's not as pleasant.
Right.
So that's why I want to have a good best guess.
But just so we're on the same page, are we talking about just, because there's technically two buildings, we're just talking about the bathroom building and nothing right now for the
Lifeguards and the.
other building?
I think that was our recommendation was to close the concession.
Right.
So whatever expenses are required for that should be someplace. Then it was to upgrade the fit and finish of the bathhouse to be the same standard as weed. The outdoor furniture, I don't know, we can go back through the recommendations, I feel like we've been.
Right, but I mean, others are not right now, say, okay, now we've got this second building that's there and available, the lifeguards use a room, the police do whatever they do in there. And then the space, you know, we talked about could the space for
The concession
be
be
repurposed.
Yep.
Do we put a placeholder in there for that for this year or have that for,
I would put a
Following
placeholder
year.
for the, close the concession the first year, and then I think the next year, retrofitting the concession into something else would be part of the FEMA cap, because I think that would be probably more structural work if somebody wanted to open it up or so forth. So then, so I think then the other placeholder would be, building work that falls within the FEMA cap, and I would put 170 against that, because that's our current max.
So to close concession stand, would the expenses be just like removal of equipment and?
Yeah, I think that would go under operating, and so whatever it takes to move the equipment out of there, sell it.
I think that should say, not close concession stand.
So it's probably not, that's not a capital expense.
I think
No,
that's
it's
more
not.
like.
No,
What do you do with the building?
There's
Really
any
make it
expense.
structural?
Building
Oh.
improvements for the bathhouse. Like
Pardon?
bathhouse improvements, what would you call it? Like renovation, bathhouse renovation? What would you-
Yeah.
Like just to have
Bathhouse
something
renovation.
so she could put it
Yeah.
there and we could start,
Bathhouse renovation, new furniture.
plus new furniture or something. Because that would be something we do, or do you want to do it? Yeah, yeah.
Pardon?
Any separate line item or?
I don't know if furniture's operating or not.
Yeah, it's probably capital, I guess. We'll say that, two together. And let's put a number, just so that,
In this fiscal?
the one that's coming in?
Yeah.
why don't we
Yep.
say, 50,000? I don't know. I don't know if that sounds good or
Put a
bad.
number
I
in.
don't know.
We could just put 50 in and then.
Put a placeholder.
I want something there because otherwise we can't talk about it if it's not there.
What is this stuff?
Oh my God. It'd be like a public meeting to see what you're looking at on your internet feed.
And then the bid
You
package,
said was how
put
much?
in, Dan thought about 20.
20?
Because when you think about the timeline, so say if we didn't get that money until the year beginning July 1st, then he needs 4 months, so that's July, August, September, October. Then you're going out to bid, he said 45 days, that's November into December, 30 days, that's January.
He said 4 months to really determine.
Right,
either.
so you're not gonna start, and then that's January, February, you're not gonna start the project in February going into beach season, I
No,
don't
it'll have to be next
think.
September.
Yeah.
So then it's really the following, practically speaking, it's really the following fiscal year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so it's really fiscal 24, 5.
25.
Yeah.
For,
Scroll up, just.
Yeah.
For the actual
Okay.
site plan work.
Yeah.
oh, so.
Like to do the project that,
3, whatever.
that Dan just went over tonight.
Yeah.
So what would you want the placeholder number to be? You need another line then, Pam,
Yeah,
to do the site work on top of where it says pear tree.
Yep.
Site work and dredging and.
Pear tree, yeah.
Yeah.
Country site renovation.
Parking lot and.
Yeah.
Yeah, parking lot, boat ramp,
Parking lot.
ramp.
Yeah.
flood mitigation.
Yeah.
I think we should put 3 million and put it out three years,
Right,
right?
1 million each.
No, I would go out 3 years, and I would go to the,
2 years.
well, the next
24,
Next year.
25, she said, right?
24, 25.
so that's 3 million right there.
Yeah,
At least.
because it's only gonna take 9 months of budget.
Yeah,
Right.
because you could do it, from what Dan was saying, she said that his feeling was the ideal circumstances, you close the beach September 15th, he said you probably could leave the section open because the boaters still need the boat ramps, the boats need to be come out of the boat club in the fall, whatever. But you get going, and he said, you should close the beach September over the winter, get it done the 9 months so you can, have the grand opening in the following spring. Is
Right.
it-
Going back to pear tree, add in another line for repurpose concession and landscaping maybe, like do those as 2 separate things for farther. I'm just trying to
The
list
landscaping,
everything.
farther out.
Just so we're
should be
planning.
part of the 3 million.
You want that to be part of that? Okay.
Well, Dan said you really can't do it beforehand.
I know, that's why I was
all-
saying
yeah,
that's
right,
why
that's
I
all-
wanna have
That's
that
all in
as-
that number.
Yeah. So you're saying
Okay.
3 million will include the landscaping of, okay,
Beautiful.
okay, then repurpose concession is
Beautiful.
another number, which is, why don't we say 50,000, just, I don't know, unless you want another number.
I
You
know,
can
always
do
go with
100.
the higher number.
But just keep on putting numbers at least so we have something as placeholders.
And then I think, the only thing on the landscaping is I think that we could do landscaping around the bathhouse, which is separate than the landscaping that's part of the site work.
Yeah.
And so I would think that the other line items for pear tree would be,
Would it go under bathhouse renovation?
uh,
Furniture / landscaping?
yeah, you could throw it in there. Yeah, that's
Because the
perfect.
furniture is
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah, furniture, that's all stuff that could get done this year.
Yeah.
And add landscaping that's immediately around the bathhouse.
Would it still be 50?
I mean, keep on
65.
65, I mean, just keep on, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
As long as we have something there.
And then I think, so add landscaping there. And then I think there should be another line item, which is renovation of building, and so that would be upgrading the exterior aesthetic based on the old renovation plan from Neil Hauk. That falls under the FEMA limit, which we think is about 170, and I would put that out for, not this year, but the next year, right there.
$3 million year.
The one in from the 3 million year, right?
No,
No.
because this is the repeat.
Oh, that's the same year, okay, fine, then put 170
Getting it all done in 1 year, it would be.
So then you'd be doing it while you're doing the parking lot.
Yeah,
Yeah, that would be nice.
that would be
Yeah.
nice if it's all done.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Is that, where is the electrical and the plumbing and all of this?
That would have to be in the 170.
Yeah.
Um,
Excuse me, Lori, I don't know if you can see me or not, but I would like to say something if I am allowed.
Yeah?
Yes.
It's hard, it's difficult tonight to hear everything. I'm trying to follow along, and I thought I understood you to say that you didn't want to do too much maintenance and landscaping, but, Pam and I had discussed putting 5 trees down at Pear Tree, and this year, but they were the wrong kind of trees. Why can't we put that into this year's budget to get them planted in the spring on the front beach, South Beach, so that they're not going to be disturbed even if we do the parking lot? I think that should be in this year's budget and not wait for another 2 or 3 years to get that planted.
But this year's budget would not hit spring of 2022, I mean 2023. It would be summer, fall, and obviously planting's best in the fall, so it'd be fall of 2023.
And I believe the plan that was just approved does bring the South Beach in as well. And so you'd be doing site work over brand new planted trees, and Dan just really didn't think that was wise.
Right, the back beach is a whole different ballgame. That's gonna be expanded, possibly expanded, and the parking lot. But in the front beach, it's not gonna be that detrimental over there. And the tree line is gonna stay where it is. It's not gonna move back or go forward.
I thought,
And-
that's what I'm saying, I thought Dan said that beach actually does get moved, that the parking lot, I think there's some movement there as well.
But I would
It's
hear,
about 5 inches towards the parking lot.
right, Cheryl, what Cheryl's saying too, the tree line itself won't move, whether you,
No, the tree
right,
line
add more
won't
sand
move.
or not.
But I think what we're saying is that construction may harm new trees. And so it might be best so we don't lose those new trees that we want to put in. And it's a wonderful idea that we just wait until the construction is finished.
I couldn't hear what you said.
Sorry. I'll try and speak up. I said it's a wonderful idea to put the trees on the beach because having that shade is great. But the construction may disturb those new trees and the roots for them, as well as the fact it's going to be a major construction. And so it might be best to wait to do the landscaping until the construction is finished, so we don't spend money on trees that don't survive the construction.
I understand that, but I don't see that the line of the trees is not gonna be impaired or even come close to that. It's just gonna take out the curbing and move it back.
All right, I can only say I asked,
We don't even- We're not even sure as to when this project is even going to get done.
okay.
So we're gonna wait 2, 3, 4 years out for trees when people have asked for these trees in that survey.
I think the other thing we talked about was just getting a better idea of like what our planting should be. I think we as a commission, we've been getting a lot of great donations and things like that. But we're stuck sometimes with the tree that we're given. And I think we need to do a bigger plan with landscaping, especially at Pear Tree, to make sure it works with the location and site, and that we're putting in appropriate
But that would be
plantings.
part of the planting plan that
Yes, and I'm
Dan
okay
will
with
be
that.
doing as part of
Which is
the
what my
final
point
bid
is
package,
that it's
right?
better for us to wait until we get that done and
Right.
not just put trees up just because we're like, if we can put trees up.
Right, I mean, he's a professional landscape architect, and that's part of
Yeah,
this whole package is putting in,
he will have suggestions.
He will have
It'll
suggestions
work
and-
together
yes.
and,
There's just so much heavy machinery
yeah.
that will literally bulldoze things over because it's more convenient and
Yeah.
easier for them
Right.
to do that rather than being careful and
Yeah.
It's
I mean, that's what he said, he said if you
difficult
think, you
to-
know, these workers are gonna say, oops, there's a little tree I gotta work around, he said, it's
No,
not gonna
no,
happen.
Right.
It's gonna
I
take
mean, we
That's a
had,
really
I
good
feel like we
point.
had to like put literally fences around
Doesn't
canopies
work.
of trees, and then they just right over.
Right.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
It's
think,
hard.
just picking up on something Cheryl said, I think at Pear Tree, because the site's so complex and there are all these components, they're interrelated, is one reason why it's been so many years before a decision's been made. So to Lori's point, I think that bid package for the site work is super important, because figuring out if town is going to move forward with that extensive parking lot work, that triggers how we approach other things. And I know when Roten Point looked at doing their parking lot for much less work, they came back with a number that it was going to be $3 million. So this number could come back at a cost prohibitive number for something that's putting, future climate change. It's addressing a 10-year problem with a big number today, and it's possible town decides
Kick it
it's
down
to kick it down the road 10 years, but I think getting the information to know what it'll cost will help us make decisions to say, okay, we are doing the site work now, or we're kicking that down the road for 10 years because it's too big and too far into the future. So I think line 38 is important.
Right, if they can get that done in 4 months.
Yeah,
that would not be
helps
so
determine,
long.
and that gives us the bid package to get the costs, then there'll be a decision, hopefully at.
So this bid package will help this number, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes, well, I mean, in theory, you
Yeah.
would say, let's get the bid package and let's go and just close the beach for a year and everybody goes to weed. I mean, I don't think people would like that, but in theory, you could do it if you just said, this is our priority and this is the project we want to get done first, and let's just get the bid package and let's go, and if the beach gets closed early, for a year, then people can go to weed after.
Right, but I think if we get the bids back and it's $10 million, people might say,
No.
maybe this is something we want to do 10 years from now.
Right.
And so I think getting the cost estimate will really help inform what happens.
Yes. I agree.
I guess.
If you went out to bid, you get the bid package, if you went out to bid, you don't have to go forward. You just go out to bid and say, okay, now we know what it's gonna cost? Or is that not a thing?
No, you can, but
Or does that just irritate
Yeah.
contractors?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've held
Because-
things up. I mean, we held up Wheat Beach.
you don't have to, like, for instance, if you get, you don't get a lowest bidder, if everything comes in high, that could happen where you have to go out to bid again. But typically, if you're going out to bid, you're going out to bid for the work that's gonna get done.
Because if you don't go out to bid, how else do you get your costs?
Good numbers, yeah.
That's what I'm saying, it's
You
like
get
chicken or the egg.
quotes, well, you're getting quotes, and so that's what, right, from the bid package here, he should be able to come up with a thorough number.
Danny.
Yeah, so that's why, we're working with the $1 million for Weed Beach, I mean, that's through a vendor.
Yeah.
He's priced it out. We all good here?
I think
Yeah,
it
some
definitely
lines,
needs
good.
more work, but I think that for tonight, we
Right.
need to really focus on figuring out what we want to do this year, because it's 10 o'clock, it's almost 10 o'clock, and I want to,
Right,
we need to fine tune this and
Yeah.
give you something to go forward with.
and we can, so we're all saying as commission right now, we need to approve this on December 14th. So we have a few weeks, and God forbid we went into January because we had to, this is a big, they would have to wait for us, I
Right.
think.
Yeah, well,
Right?
I don't wanna do that. We don't have the 15,000 in anywhere for the bid package for weed.
Okay.
Unless you have some spare change in your pocket.
No.
Right.
I could try though.
Hey, you can't.
So this is for this year, right?
That's what I'm asking, with the, no, I need
For
the-
July 1st.
well, if we've got the million, then you need the 15,000, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you need
That's
a
true.
million in the same year if you have the 15,000?
Well, the bid package would allow for
You to go right
timing
away.
to go in the
Right
same.
away?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
There's
We're
no
not,
other time.
yeah, it's fine. But it's really for Meadow and Trail, isn't it?
True.
It's for Meadow and Trail.
So I just don't wanna have different.
I just say bid package for Meadow and Trail.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
So let's see, can you go down and show us like what number you're at now?
And most likely they'll change.
Let me just ask the question this way. At the end of the day, it will be the selectmen and the Board of Finance and the RTM who decide whether it's important to do the parking lot, or, you know, the resiliency, and, you know, we may be asking Craig to come back and, you know,
Yeah.
share his thoughts with others. I mean, I felt he made a compelling case. This is something that the town is going to need to do. But I guess the question for this commission is are we convinced as a group, based on what we heard from Dan and Craig, that this is something that we feel, you know, needs to be addressed to preserve that property, you know, and then that we want to put forward as a, you know, fairly immediate priority of ours?
I think, given what we know right now, I think yes, but to Karen's point, if it goes back at X component million, then we would probably all reconsider if the cost is gonna be so high. Dredging is really expensive, as well as doing the parking lot, but I think based on what he presented is a very compelling case.
And as Dan said too, it's that we have to take that offshore.
Yeah.
which is
Oh, and
really
the other
unfortunate
thing
part.
too is that, I did ask Dan about, you know, can you separate the boat ramp project out from raising the parking lot? And he said, no, because of the pitch and everything,
Yeah.
so. Another piece of it is if we want to have, we're a coastal community, we're a boating community, we don't have enough slips, we don't have enough moorings.
Right.
And we don't have a really functional boat ramp. You know, I did share, I was going to put the president, I did, you know, share this with the coastal commission. We had our meeting on Monday night, and they didn't take a formal vote, but, you know, they, as, you know, the, you know, ones overseeing, you know, what's happening on, you know, on our coastline and in the water, you know, all feel very, you know, strong, like, they want the boat ramp done. They said we've been waiting for this for a really long time, this boat ramp, so that's really another.
Was there ever a question about if the dredging gets done there, would that open up opportunity for more moorings? Just curious, no. That's not.
I think they don't want that, like I think some of the residents were, at one point they were gonna dredge and put more, weren't they gonna do
Well,
something?
there's not,
maybe figured
yeah,
out
there's not
something?
really, that wouldn't help. The dredging is just because as it fills in, you just can't
Yeah,
get out and around.
I thought it went a little bit further than that, that's why I asked.
But the dredging up and around, I think that's where it really has to be kicked over to the coastal commission and say, look, you know, and get the boat club involved or whatever and say, you know, do you guys want to do this now, do you want to do that later? But the fixing the boat ramp can't really be separated out from raising the parking lot, is what Dan has told me. So, you know, we probably need to, when we, you know, have it in there, it's,
So what would be, so there wouldn't be a choice to just do the boat ramp? I'm just
no,
asking. No.
no. No, that's, I asked him that question.
You good here?
Yep. You ready to do operating?
I think I'm ready now.
All right, so I know it's getting late, and I've shared this operating budget with you. The two main driving budgetary items are the new proposed program coordinator position. And I feel as if the second document that I sent to you all, knowing that it was going to be a long meeting, explained it quite well in the sense that this particular, and the reason, let me just step back, the reason that we're even proposing this is because it's been extremely difficult to try to find part-time people to fill all these positions. So even the paddle hut, there's 5 part-time people. The 2 waterfront coordinators, which Jim couldn't even find this year, so therefore he hired someone we already had working for us, but then had to train him in waterfront. So, and that was difficult, so.
Security guards
and
were a disaster.
They were a disaster, and I'm gonna minimize this and bring up our go-to meeting, and Jim, are you still on? Or are you asleep?
Codling's on.
Jim Coglin.
I'm awake, I'm awake, I'm awake.
So, this position ultimately would be under Jim. He is the one that goes out and tries to find all these part-time people. So Jim, if you could speak to that, I think it would be really important.
Yeah, sure. Real quick, just so you know, the gatehouse at Weed Beach, I believe, is 21 years old.
Oh.
The guys have to go down about 3 times every summer to adjust the door because it's all rotted out. We have security guards who cannot close the door and lock it properly. We have town equipment in there, including computers and credit card readers, that there's been some nights where we haven't been able to lock and secure that gatehouse, so that needs to be replaced. I mean, it's over 20 years old. In terms of the security, in terms of the new position, it's extremely hard to find part-time workers. We're not immune here in Darien to it. It's a nationwide issue, and especially in the last 2 years. The positions that I would be looking to cover are the waterfront coordinator. That position in previous years, I've worked with the Board of Education, and they have been really good about getting basically advertisements out for that position. And in the past, we've been able to get a teacher to man that. Usually somebody who was a former lifeguard, but gone are the days where we can find somebody to do that. Teachers are they're tutoring, they're making double, triple the amount of money they would for us. So we really struggle with that position. The other positions that it would be replacing are some, especially weekend hours in the paddle hut, which is one of our hardest shifts to fill. As well as in the office, we have somebody who comes in basically from April through July. And it's been very difficult in the last several years to find somebody to come in and do that. So they're coming to sell beach stickers, process spring and summer program registrations. We also have somebody that our part-time permanent people have to help Alicia with the youth commission with her summer camps, and we really need a strong person for that position to help out in the office. And as Lori mentioned, the security guards were a mess, we'll say. Last summer, a lot of times the security guards were, were calling out on weekends, and the patrol person had to fill in at the security booth, so we didn't even have a patrol person. So that's really, it's difficult to find part-time help, and it's taking the money out of our budget will pretty much cover the salary for that position. So that's kind of where we are right now. Hopefully, any questions, just feel free to ask.
So Jim, it's interesting that you just mentioned that, because today I was having one of those moments where I something flashed through my head as I was going into the office, and then I wanted to share it with Jim. By the time I got Jim, I could completely forgot. I'm like, it'll come to me. It just came to me right now. And because when you were describing the security huts, the security guards rather than the park monitor, my aha moment was also that, is this the opportunity to maybe look at the actual vendor that we've been hiring to put in security guards in these booths, and maybe that's an opportunity where we hire part-time people in town and we open up jobs, and rather than relying on this outside vendor. It's just a potential something to think about.
Right, because they're obviously not vetted enough.
Yeah, I think we're going to have the same problem there. Hiring staff. We're pulling from the same pool. It's basically. I think the guards they had overall were good. I think that the monitors were not. So I think that was our bigger issue. I know that the town several years ago looked at. They used to have people who that we would hire, but they found that they were struggling to hire people. It was also. I think they were saving money with Social Security and taxes and things by contracting out a service. So that would have to be a question we'd have to talk to Kate and finance about, I believe.
Well, I guess it's counterintuitive to even think that anyway, because here we are struggling. This is the reason we're providing, a position like this. So,
What are
Yeah.
the hours for the person? Is it weekend hours? I'm
There'll be
trying-
weekend and nights, and we haven't completely laid that out yet, but it would be weekend and nights, and because there would be definitely daytime hours during the week, but then the weekend, as Jim said, is the most important part to fill the paddle hut hours. So they have a fluent office right there at the paddle hut, where they'd be able to not oversee the paddle facility, but also be working on programming and events for our
But
office.
it's just a 40-hour, whatever,
Yeah,
40-hour
yes.
position. So it
Salary
would be weekends and all this, okay, cool. And then
No
you would have-
overtime, because we did talk to Kate about it today, I didn't want her to be surprised by this. And she did say that she's looking to, there's many other departments in town hall that are also doing the same, looking for full-time work, so. It's a tough ask, I know it's gonna be tough to get it, but I do think it makes sense.
So
And
is it the benefits that put you over? Because you said you can cover all of these things with your salary, but you're just
well,
saying.
there's $66,000 that we can withdraw out of our budget, right, to offset these costs. But you know, benefits do cost a lot of money. So-
Benefits generally, it's another 30%,
Yeah,
30,
another
yeah.
third.
So I'm saying that's gonna be the part. It
Yes.
sounds like you're being reasonable, you're replacing people.
Right, and I don't think that other departments have the ability to do what I'm doing here, right? So it'd be a lot easier to manage the one person. I do think that it'd be still great to have somebody on our full-time staff that's out monitoring the parks, being the eyes and the ears of our department. I think we'd get a lot out of it. And I also think too, we've mentioned the additional revenue. I mean, Jim had said, you know, we yet to do paddle tournaments, we probably can bring in another 10,000 there. We're looking to put an additional paddle court, which we could potentially bring another $15,000 to $20,000 there. And quite honestly, our revenue's gone from $650,000 to $1.3 million. We anticipate that number to go to $1.4 million. So regardless of what position, our department has brought in this money. We've brought in revenue. There's no way you can't say that we don't subsidize our budget.
Yeah.
We do. We subsidize it greatly and in ways that many other departments can't do it. And I think it's our responsibility to do that too. So I am always going to continue to look at creative ways of bringing in revenue. I talked to our two office people today. They were kind of, was like very quiet in the office, and I said, well, start researching. What are great ways for departments to bring in more revenue? And we have done that. We brought in $27,000 in kayak revenue just by building our own racks. We brought in $7,000 this year for the concession at Wheat Beach, and hopefully that continues to grow. $6,000 in the kayak company on the beach. We also brought that in. So we continue to do that, and I think that it speaks for itself. If we had a full-time employee, we would ask the same of that person. So, thank you,
Sounds
Jim. You can go to bed now. Let's see.
Sounds good if you get someone to work on weekends and kind of be flexible about when they work, because it sounds like you need it for different seasons, different times.
Right, and we do, and not only that, another positive was to think about all the parties that we hold, whether it be in the picnic area or the paddle hut. We then can actually save money there too. That particular position can open the facility for the parties. We wouldn't have to hire someone to do that anymore. They'd show up at the end, make sure it's all cleaned up. Picnic parties too. I mean, that's what was great about the park monitor, you know, when we had good park monitors. Could show up at picnics and make sure that they either lended a hand or they made sure, just reminders that they don't leave garbage out at night because of the animals, make sure they went and checked to make sure it was clean. So there's a lot of good reasons for, I think, getting this position. So that's one of the drivers, which is put in here. So that is there. And then of course the other driver was, and these red marks here that you see are basically us adjusting, taking out 19,000, and that those adjustments equal the 66,000. This one you did not see. So I went through my budget, and I do think it would be important to, I think there's been confusion about facility maintenance materials. We have facility maintenance materials, and I thought I added another one. Let's see if I got it. I believe so. No, that was the anyway, I will send it to everybody as well, but what I did do is I want to make sure that you're all understand that we have facility maintenance in different line items. We have it under ground, we have it under beach and court, which is facility maintenance materials, and what I want to do is send you a detailed list of what this 11,300 comprises of. Now, this was 7,800, I just increased it 3,500 for paint, because what was in there as a detail was only 1,200 for paint. And if we, at this point, are looking to continue keeping up with the standards of care
Right,
for painting these things, we need to increase, obviously, paint.
right.
And then we have our grounds. Here we have, oh, that's equipment maintenance, equipment repair and maintenance, and then we have down in here, facility repair and maintenance, which is 118. So what I want to do also is give you the breakdown of that 118 and how we came up with that. So, you know, one of them here is I highlighted, because we've lost our vendor, Charles.
Oh, the guy that did all your.
Yeah, somehow he just stopped responding. Yeah, so I kind of went back to what we all originally thought was much too inexpensive of $8,000. This is a rough number at 16, but I thought that at least throw it in now, so if I can give myself a few weeks to see whether or not I can get a better number there. So I did increase that, and that equals up to the 118,000 there. But I want to give you a better understanding of what it makes, what this 118 is. You know, there's everything from electricity to plumbing to, it's not broken up into Pear Tree or Weed Beach. It used to be years ago from the other director, but Kate really didn't like the way that it was laid out, wanted more specific, not Weed Beach is a bigger beach, so $15,000 goes there. Pear Tree is smaller, $5,000 goes there. Instead, it's broken into quantities of different things like plumbing and electricity and paint and things like that. So I'm going to send that to you so you have a better understanding. But in reality, there's not really that many changes other than the position. Oh, fireworks, and also fireworks. So fireworks was, we did take it over quite a few years ago, four years ago now, I think, with the expectations that sponsorship would always be provided to us, and we wouldn't be seeking sponsorship, which is a huge endeavor. And this event costs about $38,000 a year, and to raise that amount of funds in our small department it's a huge ask. And Dave Genovese, bless his heart, he did an incredible job over the years, but he's just made it very, very clear that he can no longer do that. So we have $23,000 left over in our budget for fiscal 23 next year, well, for July 1st, for fiscal 24. So I added 15,000 in there. So, you know, I hope that goes through. I hope the town is understanding about that, because the following year we would be putting in 38. And that really is about it. The revenues speak for itself.
How much are the parking permits for the parking at the fireworks?
25, so we brought in, and I changed that number. At one time I had 11 here, I did highlight it in red because I went back and looked at the revenues and they were just over 9. And so again, that's not a number you can count on, because from year to year you don't know whether you'll sell out or you won't.
Oh, really?
Right.
Doesn't always sell out? I thought.
I assumed it always sold out.
I know.
Yeah.
Not always. No, I think last year actually we had more parking, because, you know why? Because there's so much free parking given away from the vendors and the sponsors and their families, and a lot.
You had sponsors, they gave money, so they
Yeah,
paid for it.
yeah.
Just with sponsorship.
So a lot that, you know, you lose a lot of money there, but you gain money because they gave money, so.
Yeah.
So you're saying there won't be a sponsorship program, it'll just be fully funded by the town?
Fully funded.
But
Okay.
have we considered raising prices of the permits? Or 25 is already.
Well, you know, truthfully, what I feel is that I don't think that it should be dependent upon our office or one of our employees to have to go out and ask for money
Oh, no,
for
no.
this.
For sure.
However, we do raise funds, right? That's just as I mentioned, we are bringing in a lot of revenue, and we will continue to do that, and we'll continue to look at, creative ways of doing that. We haven't gotten to the potential yet of where we can go with an event, like Rocktoberfest, and Wade Beach obviously changed from COVID, but we have huge potential to run a really good event, a weekend event at Highland. It has a room for it, so I'm really confident that down the road we're going to start bringing in more revenue from things like that. We just haven't gotten there yet, you know.
I think what Pam's saying is that she doesn't feel the staff has the capacity to commit to raise all the money needed to run the fireworks program, so
Oh, I
again,
understand it, but I'm just asking, looking at one thing, which is the revenue coming in from the parking permits.
It could be anywhere from 7,000 to 11,000, you know.
Right, but have we considered raising the prices beyond $25?
We have not.
Okay. So that's not something that staff would have to go after, it would have to be a decision, high-level decision that.
And we could discuss that as a commission with our fees.
Right, like at what point would it be considered unreasonable or exorbitant or,
They're $25 now.
Yeah.
You might be able to go to 30, but,
Yeah.
and maybe, more. But I guess, I look at it this way, the town, and it seemed that the town wanted those fireworks.
Yes.
At whatever cost, Pam, figure it out. You're gonna, we don't want them to not happen. So if that's the case, then,
Pam, this is Patty.
yeah.
As I recall, well, this is my pitch. I don't think that you people should have to get the sponsors. I think it's not fair to you all. I think it should be on the selectmen to get it. I'll share that with them. And by the way, I think, perhaps some of the money should come from the selectmen's budget. You shouldn't be afraid to gently ask that. Because when Susan Marks and those guys ran this event, didn't that come out of the selectmen's budget along with getting sponsors? It just got rolled over to you 4 years ago. So just go back and do some diligence on that. And,
I believe the only thing.
I don't think you guys should be in charge of having to get the sponsorships.
Right, thank
You have way too much going on.
The selectman's office pays for the police. Yeah.
I think,
They pay for what?
The police.
I think you leave it in there, it's gonna be a discussion you're gonna have with Kate, we'll have, or whatever,
Yeah.
but just say, look, if we wanna be sure we have this event, we need the money from somewhere.
And I've already dropped the seed with her too, that won't be a surprise.
Do you get any money from the food vendors,
We do $100 a food vendor. So
Nothing.
we could, well, you know what, right, we could, no, we don't get a percentage, but we could raise that. We know now, after the few years of all the lines and things like that, that we can raise that. Now with the experience of running the event. And I feel that way with, say, our event at Highland, right? We're sticking at $100 and $50 for vendors because we haven't brought all those people in yet. With the fireworks we are, but again, there's only so much they're going to pay though too, so.
How many vendors are there usually, typically?
I think last year we had 8, and matter of fact, the one vendor that sells all the glow sticks and all that kind of stuff, we raised him up to $250.
Yeah.
Because he makes a killing.
Yeah.
So, we knew that too. So of course, we raised some money there too.
Most of those food trucks are used to paying a percentage of the events that they go to, not a vendor fee, but a percentage of what they bring in. You could
Yeah,
probably.
what we run into, and I've had a lot of experience with that, is that they'll never want to tell you what they sell. So we ran into that, so we really felt like flat fees. So in North Branford, at my festival that I ran there, it was $1,200 for one food truck, but it was 3 days. But they were more than willing to pay the $1,200 because they made a lot of money,
Right.
because we brought in a lot of people.
Okay, let's keep moving.
Yep.
Can you just refresh our memory with the line number 7? where did the Parks and Rec program fees go? So they went from
Yes.
1.3 million, so where does the extra?
So there's a brand new revenue account that's
Got
set
it,
up.
okay,
So
that's where that
So
all
that we
goes.
don't have to go back and try to estimate what we're going to be. So
Got
this 275 took the place of what we net at the end of the day with revenues and expenses.
Got it, okay.
Yep.
Got it,
So
okay.
instead of having a revenue budget,
And
an
an
expense
expense
budget, you have
budget,
a
it's a net budget,
Because what's
okay.
happening is if we did really well with the programs,
Then
then our
we had to go
expenses
ask
went
for
up, and then we
more.
had to go ask for money.
Okay, good.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
And Lori, because it's 10:15,
Yes.
can we figure out how we can end by 10:30? Like,
Yeah.
yes?
And we have other things we have to cover. Some of them I think we can chop through super quickly.
And I think that this, it pretty much speaks for itself. I
Right.
think it looks pretty good other than the two big ends. Okay, good.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Save that.
So Pam, on the discussion of the foundation gift on the flag, is that time sensitive or could we move that till next month?
I feel like we can use that.
Okay.
Yeah, because she
Okay.
has some pending.
She had some pending
Yes,
questions. I mean, did you send out there, I thought you'd sent that out to everybody, but I don't remember. But the Darien Foundation is going to replace the flagpole. They'll come back with a few questions or stipulations that we're going to have to figure out. They were asking about the flag policy of the town. You might recall that Monica had begun the process of putting a flag policy in place. It got on pause. I did reach out to her, and it's going to be on the agenda for them. I forget what, one of the November meetings for the selectmen, so that will address one of the foundation's questions, and one of the things they asked is whether, for their anniversary year, if they could fly their flag on the pole, but Pam, I think we needed to hear from them in terms of, they talking about a week, a month, forever?
Right, and I
So-
haven't answered that yet.
So we've got some open questions, so I think we'll circle back on that, but it's wonderful that they're willing to put that flagpole back for us. On the dog program, Kathy, thank you for drafting some language. We'll vote on it next month. We just wanted to see if people have had a chance to review it, if they were comfortable with it, had any questions or such, or you can just percolate with it, and then we would vote on it next month.
If you have
But
any comments, feel free to send them over to us.
right, but just for our audience, this would codify a permanent change in our rules that we have the Weed Beach Dog Program from November 1st till March 31st only. That the dogs are permitted to be unleashed only in the designated area, that they must be supervised at all times, owners must have a leash in hand, leash is no more than 10 feet. Owners should remove and dispose of all the dog feces. We're proposing, Kathy and I went back and forth about this, that there would be no more than 2 dogs off leash per owner at any time. I was somewhat concerned about the professional dog walkers going down and letting 6 dogs run, so our dog owners can say whether they think 2 is the right number, but we want to have something in there. A note that unleashed dogs must be able to socialize with other dogs and stay under the control of the owner. There's language that violators can be fined, that the benefit can be revoked, and then very clear language about where dogs are not permitted, which is that they're not allowed either leashed or unleashed in the playground, paddle courts, tennis courts, remaining areas at the beach or the bathhouse. They're only permitted on leash in the parking lot, so it really lays that all out. And they're not permitted anywhere in the property April 1 to October 31st, so that's the proposed
Would the woods
language.
behind consider the remaining areas of the beach?
Say
You know,
that
like
again,
the wooded
please.
area, like the path, that's,
We can have
I didn't
the
know
path
if that
in
was very, you know what I'm talking about? The
Yeah.
wooded area that we walked behind where the fitness equipment is
Are you
behind.
proposing to add that?
I'm just saying that's more, because it sounds like beach areas, like areas of the beach, so that's the proper of the beach, you know what I mean, like where the sand is. And I'm saying the wooded area behind.
I think where the path is gonna be.
Yeah, where the path is
Right. Yeah,
currently.
yeah.
No, I just want to,
That's a good point.
you know, because
We
people
can
might
add
say,
that.
oh, I can walk my dog there, it's a path, you know?
So you're saying add that that's not allowed? Okay.
That's not allowed or allowed?
I thought not allowed only because we've already not letting them in the parking lot. So then, you know, like, you're starting to carve out other areas that are farther afield, you know? Huh?
It looks like you are letting them.
They are
Yeah,
letting
but on
them
leash.
leash.
I was just gonna make a suggestion for clarity here, because I think it's confusing for most dog owners, including myself. that the people aren't gonna walk the dogs in the parking lot, because that's not where dogs walk, because there's cars around. Dogs walk on grassy areas and so forth, because they walk for not only for exercise, but for smelling, and that's the whole thing. So maybe if you just make this more clear that the whole program is the Weed Beach Park program, and that and be specific about the areas of the sandy beach that they are allowed, and that the rest of the areas, whether they be grassy areas or wooded areas, or they're allowed to be on a leash or not, depending upon what you want. But
Well, it's not.
It
It's-
seems
They're not allowed there.
They're not.
Period.
You basically can walk your dog through the parking lot to
Right,
get to
through
the
the parking lot.
designated area. That's it.
so. Well, maybe then making the whole program more clear about the fact that it's what are the rules on the entire park, and then at what time of year, and then during the November through March time period, they are allowed on the beach without a leash in a designated area on the sandy beach.
Well, that's what
Everywhere else,
this says.
nowhere else are they allowed to be in except to get out of your car, be on a leash in the parking lot.
Mhm.
Because right, the way it says be maybe walked leashed in the parking lot, it seems like you can walk your dog all around the parking
Well,
lot.
you can.
Right.
You can.
And people do, so we're
Yeah, they
trying
did.
to
That was-
respond to that.
When I've been there, people are walking through the woods and so forth, they know they're not allowed on the beach, on the sandy beach.
They're not allowed in the woods either.
But people don't say that, like they don't
That's why we're
think
gonna add
that.
Right.
So maybe just be more specific, as she was suggesting, about where they're allowed to be instead of where they're not allowed to be. You can just say everywhere else they're not allowed, and make it simple and say, this is a program that only allows dogs in the beach, in the park itself, November 1 through March 31st, and when they're allowed in that park, they're only allowed on the sandy beach
To the far
designated
left of
area.
the property.
Period, and you don't even have to just
No,
dismiss everything else.
I'm going to respectfully disagree. I want it spelled out in abundant clarity where they cannot be. I actually like this language where it's very clear where they're not allowed. Because I get too many, I didn't know that, so.
Then I would suggest adding, as you suggested, the wooded areas, grassy areas, all that, just say, that's all
Be
not allowed.
specific, yeah.
Be specific.
The signage, I was just there today, it's very specific, that it's only the area that
Yeah.
is in front
And
of
we're
it.
missing the one at the gate, but I'm getting one made.
No, it looks really good, I was
So-
gonna compliment you.
Yeah.
I thought it was nice, I was,
Compliment Kathy.
yeah, I just sent you a picture, yeah, you guys did good.
And just to be specific, in our rules, it's section 42/R29B, dogs in parks. Currently, section 5 refers to weed and pear tree that says no dogs. My recommendation would be that we make Weed Beach number 2 and have all this sort of where dogs can go at the top. And then we'll change the one just for pear tree. And then it does state, I noticed here, it says Stony Brook and Diller Park dogs are permitted off leash, and that's not correct at Diller. So actually, we didn't fix that when Diller was done, so we'll need to fix that at the same time.
And there's a sign saying you can't bring dogs up to
Yeah.
Dillon.
That's right, our
It's
rules
not
say
the
they are.
rules.
Yeah.
Our rules say they are, so I'm just saying when we vote on this
When we
next
vote,
month,
yeah,
we need
just
to,
make sure we
we
don't
need to
change.
clean that up, but I would, and then I think we move Diller down and make it more like number 6. And just so it'll, the first 3 sections will be Cherry Lawn, Weed, and Tilly, where dogs are allowed some level of off-leash. Then we go into the parks where dogs are allowed on-leash, and then where dogs aren't allowed off would be my thought. Okay?
That sounds good.
Okay, so take a look at this, send comments or any other cleanup, and then we'll vote on this next
Thank you.
month. And thank you again, Kathy.
Yeah, that was great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, your report.
Okay, so, yep, I always say it, I think it speaks for itself, hopefully
Thank
everybody
you.
read it, but I just have one highlight. And the good thing about having a late meeting is most likely Chris Filmer's not up watching it. Because this is what we would like to present tomorrow at his celebration as a work in progress, because it hasn't been completely approved, or it just tweaks, put it that way. But we had one of our park guys who has a sign business on the side, design this, and we will be able to unveil it tomorrow as a work in progress, but
Well, this looks great.
Lovely.
yeah,
They're nice signs.
really nice, right?
Oh, thank you so
So
much.
they will be 3D, so
Oh,
basically
wow.
this tree would be popping out.
Yeah.
They cut stick.
Oh, is it made out of like the?
He does it with 3 different materials, and so
Pretty
anyway,
resilient.
very exciting about it. And it's
Car, are
beautiful.
you going to?
Yeah, they're beautiful. And there's 180 people apparently tomorrow. Right.
Nice for them.
So it's a pretty awesome recognition. And that's all I have for my report.
Any questions for Pam?
I have a really quick one. I just want to mention the Darien-Town tree lighting. Last year, do we put a menorah at Tilly?
We're doing that again, but
Okay.
it's
It's not part of the celebration.
no, it is. It's actually a seasonal celebration with the Chamber of Commerce and the Darien Sports Shop and Parks and Recreation. And I thought we put it in there what the name of it was.
Yeah, we did put it last year.
Yeah, so I just want to be sure, like whatever,
So Dan Guller
promotional
is the one who's
material.
handling the menorah.
Dan,
Guller.
yeah, he's.
Yes,
right, right, right.
he's
He
involved with
championed
us,
that
and
last
that
year,
will
too.
be apparently lit around
The
December 8th.
18th or something.
Yeah.
Starts December 8th.
Is that one
I
like
believe
in the
he's doing
neat,
16th or something.
the Grove?
Mhm.
Is that the one in the Grove or the one in Tilly?
Grove? At Grove.
Okay. So, but that's not the same night as the tree?
No, but it's called the season, what was it? I'm forgetting. The chamber calls it the season of celebration of.
Okay. I just didn't
We
see it
are
on here,
part
so I
of
was
that.
sure.
We are part of that.
Now we're
Okay.
gonna expand it to other religions, I remember we talked about last year, so.
Right, so
Yeah.
we're handling, well, with the Darien Sports Shop, the tree lighting, and then, which last year was the same day, we've gone back to separating it. So it's gonna be the tree lighting, it's going to be the old fashioned holiday, they're also gonna have the season of, the Chamber of Commerce.
So that's coming up
Right,
too.
all
Okay,
that is in the same time period, yes.
Any other questions for Pam? Okay, just last thing, I didn't have too much in my report that we really didn't touch on. I brought up the coastal commission and whatever, so. The only thing that I just passed out, and I'll have to email this to Tisha, is we'll have to vote on this next month, proposed dates for next year's schedule, but I wanted to get them into people's hands. We usually do the third Wednesday of each month, and actually, it works out really well next year. It doesn't stumble
Yeah.
over the school vacations. I
Yeah.
did go and check them, so that's all fine, but I
Thanks for
made a
doing that.
note. The only thing that we can think about is we could do December 20th, which is the third Wednesday of December, but I didn't know if that was just a little close to the holiday break. And also Pam, I know that's usually when we're voting on the budget, and that might be not great, so I was thinking we'd move that to the 13th. Hanukkah does start the 8th and runs for 8 nights? 7, 8
Yeah, I think
nights.
that's better because some people might travel for Christmas and might not even be here
I
for the
probably will
Wednesday.
be gone like the 16th.
Right, so that would be the one thing I would think about is moving that.
21st of
And
Yeah.
usually we end up
Right.
canceling August, but we'll put a placeholder there. So we'll vote on this next month, but Pam, I know you have to reserve the room too, so.
Okay. And then will we be able to have these on our calendars?
Well, technically we'll vote on it next month, but it's sounding like everybody's
Yeah.
thinking this is good.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm saying just as a mechanism, like.
Oh, that's
once
not a
it's-
question for me.
Once it's approved.
I think Pam sent it out last.
Yeah, I think Pam, you sent it, okay, I somehow they miraculously appeared on my calendars this year, so I just was curious, is that something you?
Whether
Tamara did it.
you'll do again?
Okay.
Thank you. It's
So love those
helpful.
office admins.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll get this out to the whole commission because, we don't have everybody here tonight. Okay, I think we need to wrap it up here. If somebody wants to make a motion to adjourn, Susan, Kathy second, all yes. Yeehaw, anybody
Thank you.
opposed? Nope. Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.